is the last time I'm going to be in front of all of you for a minute. So just want to acknowledge all of the Kira squad who makes these meetings happen, and our newest team member, Byron, who has joined us from Public Works and is a former second floor staffer, and all of central staff and the clerk's office who help me when I don't know what's going on. All right, with that, a roll call. Chair Morrell present, Councilmember Moreno present, Councilmember Green present, Councilmember Harris present, Councilmember Giarrusso present. We have a quorum of both committees.
Thank you. First up, we have the approval of the minutes. Councilman Giarrusso moves for approval of the minutes, to which Councilman Moreno seconds. Is there any opposed to the approval of the minutes? Hearing none, the minutes are approved unanimously for the Utility Committee. First up, we have ordinance calendar. First up, we have the presentation regarding the wireless infrastructure permitting. Who's making that presentation? Oh, here they come.
I forgot it. We're sorry. I can do it.
No, we'll just answer the question. Morning, Sarah McLaughlin Porteous, Chief of Staff for Infrastructure and Operations and Acting Director for the Department of Public Works. We'll just briefly go through introductions.
Brian Block, the Director of the Bucharest Commission and the Executive Director of the Historic District Landmarks Commission.
Renee Burgoyne, Deputy Director of Bucharest Commission.
Eleanor Burke, Deputy Director of the Historic District Landmarks Commission.
Good morning, Tammy Jackson, Director of Safety and Permits.
Well, good morning again. We appreciate the opportunity to be here to provide an overview of the process for issuing small cell installation permits. Our slide presentation, hopefully you got a copy of that this morning. We'll be brief. We're going to discuss the overall process by which a permit is issued. We'll discuss the specific scope review for permits by the Department of Public Works, as well as the scope reviews by HCLC and VCC as needed. Overall, the city's 5G small cell design and permit process has been a good example of successful collaboration between the city, between the state, between the industry and community stakeholders to protect the best interests of the city, while also ensuring that our residents, businesses, and visitors have high quality connectivity services. So before we get into the presentation, I do just want to take just a couple of minutes to go through a very brief timeline just to kind of give this discussion a bit of context. So it was in 2018 that the FCC passed the new rules that require cities to permit thousands of new 5G small cell poles in the public rights of way. During that year, City Council subsequently updated the city's Wireless Franchise Act to align with the new federal rules and establish the permit process for poles in the public right of way. And then in 2019, the city began to receive hundreds of new permit applications for these 5G poles, including more than 200 proposals for 40-foot tall towers in the French Quarter. At that time, the Mayor's Office of Utilities and the Department of Public Works worked together and took the lead in developing the process to review the 5G proposals. Then in 2020, we began stakeholder meetings. Numerous meetings were held with vendors that have franchise agreements with the city, including AT&T, and community groups, including VC Pora, as well as the French Quarter Business Association, to discuss the 5G pole designs and impact on the community. It was clear at that time everybody was in agreement that the proposed 40-foot poles were not acceptable to the community. So Toro Blanco Group subsequently provided an alternative pole design that modeled after the French Quarter light poles. We do have a picture of that later, a graphic of that later in the presentation that sort of illustrates that design. Then you can see that now in the poles that have gone up in the French Quarter. Numerous meetings are also held with community organizations, with the State Historic Preservation Office, with then Council District C office to discuss the proposed designs and locations of the poles. And using input from stakeholders, a decision was made to pursue that design that was a better fit for the overall aesthetic of the French Quarter. VCC and HDLC subsequently hold numerous public meetings as well as public information meetings with VC Plura in the community. And then in 2021, the Mayor's Office of Utilities took the lead on facilitating the development of the new small cell design guidelines. The new rules, these new rules now require notice to property owners within 300 feet of the proposed pole and limit poles to one per block.
Real quickly, that before, what date did y'all start doing those rules? I didn't catch the
In 2021.
2021. Thank you.
Yes, in 2021, we started the new small cell design guidelines. It was a thorough process. It included many departments, including law, Department of Public Works, safety and permits, parks and parkways, HTLC, VCC, and the City Planning Commission. And then City Council promulgated the new small cell design guidelines in May of 2021. Finally, the Office of Utilities and the Department of Public Works organized weekly construction coordination meetings. Those were done via phone call with vendors, with contractors, with DPW, with District C, with VC Plura, as well as the French Quarter Business Organization, to discuss the progress and discuss issues that were coming up during construction of the poles in the French Quarter. So I'm going to just jump into the slide presentation just to kind of go through the overall process, maybe.
Let's do no things. You want to do no things or restore? You need them out. They have red.
There we go. Sorry about that. Okay, so this visual just kind of outlines the overall process. So I'll just kind of go through that. So initially what happens is the telecommunications provider would apply for a small set permit, an installation permit. And their submittal is going to include a site plan that shows the specific location of the installation. It includes an overhead picture, an on-the-ground view with a current picture, longitude, latitude, coordinates, the scope of work, whether it's going to be a new pole, a replacement of a streetlight pole, a stop sign post, a co-location on an existing pole, and then the design of the installation itself. Once again, as I mentioned before, the telecom is required to notify all property owners within 300 feet of the proposed location when the permit application is started. And generally speaking, residents who have complaints work directly with the telecom to find a resolution. Then the second part of that, the departmental reviews begin. So this includes the permit intake by safety and permits to check for all of the required documents, ensure they've submitted everything that we require. DPW then reviews for all locations within the public right of way. And it could also be reviewed by VCC, HDLC, and or Parks and Parkways, depending on if the installation would be within a historic district or in proximity to a tree that's in the public right of way. VCC and HDLC would consider the aesthetic design of the installation to conform to the character of the area, and their own design criteria would consider other criteria such as location to minimize any negative impacts to the area. And we do have a slide later in the presentation that goes into more detail about that. The next step would involve assessing fees based on the scope and location of the work, and those fees can range from $100 to $2,500. And once the telecom pays, the small cell installation permit would be issued. This permit serves as the approval for the location and the above surface installation, but it doesn't cover the subsurface work necessary to bring the infrastructure into service. So once that location permit is approved via the small cell installation permit, the telecom has to apply for what we call a street cut permit. It's also known as a utility or service cut permit to facilitate the installation of any foundation work that is necessary, as well as to run their subsurface utilities, subsurface conduit to power the infrastructure. So this requires review by Sewage and Water Board to check for any conflicts with their water, sewer, and drainage lines. And then it also requires review by Department of Public Works for traffic impacts and pavement restoration. So once both the small cell installation permit and the street cut permits have been issued, then the telecom can be in construction. And then let me go into the next slide where I just kind of put in a couple of graphics just so you can kind of see. This is a graphic directly from Llama for a small cell installation permit that was applied for on the 3045 Tulane Avenue. And this required review by Public Works, safety and permits, as well as HDLC. And then you see on the right-hand side, a copy of the small cell permit that was
Hey,
issued.
Sarah, let me just jump in real quick. And I just kind of went through the next slides to see if you were going to talk about it. But during this whole process, when is like the public informed that this is in the works?
So as soon as the telecom initiates the permit application, they're required to notify residents within 300 feet.
Okay, got it. So
As soon as the
telecom-
initiation of the actual permit process, as soon as they apply, they need to.
and it's the
notify.
telecom company. There's nothing
Yes.
on the city to do any type of notification.
The telecom is required to notify.
And is this, a notice in the mail?
Yes,
It's a little postcards, almost like the same ones that we get when
I
there's
think
like
it's
a
a
land use.
it's a letter.
It's a letter.
Mhm.
Okay, got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, just remember, since we don't have Granicus up and there's not a lot of members here, if you have a question, just feel free to offer it versus waiting for me to approve, because I don't have any way to know if you have a question.
Okay, we'll go through the next few slides quickly so we can get to your questions. So this is just the DPW scope for reviewing our small cell permits, kind of tells you exactly what we're looking for when we do our review. DPW wants to ensure that there are no sightline obstructions that are going to be created by the installation. We want to ensure the appropriate setback from the curb to avoid any conflict with vehicular movement or parking. Ensure a minimum of 4 feet clear pedestrian width on sidewalks and maintain pedestrian access. And ensure any proposed modification or replacement of a streetlight maintains the acceptable height in alignment with our design guidelines and does not adversely impact the street lighting. And finally, as I mentioned, ensure 300 feet separation between the installation sites. I'm going to pass it over to Brian, who's going to go through the review for this VCC HDLC scope review.
So first of all, here are examples of the polls that we have approved in the French Quarter. I think we've had a previous discussion about how there are certain aesthetic qualities that have not been completed yet. Those are production issues, and we are still in contact directly with the contractor and have been reassured that they're going to be completed shortly. We're hoping by the end of the year, although now that we've gotten into December, I am skeptical about that. That's a bit optimistic, but it is still in production. So if you have any questions from your constituents about why these polls, which were promised to look this way, are not there yet, they're still in process. So, and go back to the last line. This is important to sort of illustrate why why this program has been successful, in that originally the polls that were proposed were not decorative. They were out of set and out of scale with the aesthetics of the districts. And so we worked very hard to come up with a design. This was reviewed in multiple public meetings. We had mock-ups made on site so we could actually see them and get feedback from the public. So we feel like this was a great success. And I do believe that the success of how this rollout is going to be an example for other historic districts in the country as this goes forward. All right. So it's important that everyone understands, and I think that that the VCC and the HDLC do not have jurisdiction over anything that's in the public right of way. However, we are required to make recommendations, non-binding recommendations about things that can affect the tout ensemble, such as this. And that's why it was baked in that we would make these recommendations. And in the guidelines that were approved, the criteria that we use is that they, within one area, all small wireless facilities should be of uniform design. When new small wireless facilities are proposed, they should relate to the design intent of the existing infrastructure, including street lighting and traffic signal equipment. Towers shall be designed in such a way as to minimize their visual obtrusiveness. Proximity to existing building components, such as overhangs, balconies, and galleries, should be considered. And that was very important in our review process. We always wanted to make sure that this cell equipment particularly was not next to habitable spaces such as balconies and galleries whenever possible, or that they would be located in front of windows and doors that would mar a view from a building. Also, locations, there should be uncluttered or minimally cluttered. View sheds should be protected by locating proposed new facilities elsewhere. And also co-location of equipment on historic poles was prohibited. And this is a slide that we wanted to include. This was an article in the New York Times a few weeks ago. If you'll see the scale of the gray pole, particularly in relation to the person standing below it, this was what was originally proposed in the French Quarter. There were 200 poles of this scale that we did not think would be appropriate. The size of the poles that ultimately were approved are such that they do not break the skyline or the roof lines of buildings. So although modern equipment in the French Quarter is unsightly, at least it did not mar the overall, the visual skyline of the French Quarter, which these poles would absolutely have done.
Yeah, and just sort of echoing what Brian said, and as I mentioned earlier, I think a lot of effort was put into developing those design guidelines to do it thoughtfully so that we didn't end up in a situation like having 200 of these in the French Quarter. So with that, that concludes our presentation. I'm happy to answer your questions.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So you're not removing any of the historic poles and replacing them with these 5G poles, are you?
We are.
You are.
That was another point that was important, that we didn't want to have a forest of poles in the French Quarter. We got, applications for over 200 poles. So the strategy, and that was involved in this design, is where it was necessary to locate a pole. If there was a historic light post in the area, we would replace it with this pole so that there would be no net gain of pole.
What are you doing with the historic light poles that are in there?
They've all been salvaged and they're in the city's care. I've actually seen them. I have
So
seen them. Yeah.
they are so they are taken to the city's contractor, so they're the All-Star Yard. I can tell you, as you remember, we had a break from May, I think, until August, while we did not have that repair and maintenance contract in place.
Yeah.
So I do think there were probably some of them that were lost, but I can confirm we did a site visit recently. There are about 25 that are there now that will be repurposed.
Okay, thank you.
Got a couple of questions. Can you go back to the slide with New York City?
Yes.
I think it's important to note, and I do appreciate when we pat ourselves on the back, but the traffic pole next to that cell pole is taller than the cell pole. And so I just want to, I do agree and I appreciate that we have done our best to put historic preservation above all else. But I think a 1-for-1 comparison, Manhattan is kind of, New York as a whole is kind of a smorgasbord of different aesthetic tastes. And honestly, those very unsightly poles would probably be at home in Manhattan, just like those same unsightly poles would probably be appropriate next to South Market, depending on what the aesthetic is of the area. But I do appreciate the fact that you guys fought to keep that there. Going back to the timeline, I guess I could start with a real basic question. Is it y'all's contention that all the poles that have been installed in the French Quarter went through this established process, where every single department that was involved checked off on it, all the poles?
As best as I know.
Yes.
Okay. First off, are there poles in the French Quarter currently that are less than 300 feet apart? Because we have had a plethora, and the French Quarter, so they've measured. We've got a plethora of complaints that these poles are less than 300 feet apart.
I believe that's correct.
What happens when a pole is installed and it's less than 300 feet apart?
Once again, the VCC was reviewing these based on aesthetics and locations to historic buildings. That rule that we now see as in city code was not part of our review process. That would have come from the utilities department when the application came in.
Okay.
So we were, like I said, we were reviewing them based on the aesthetics and the location of historic buildings.
I guess what my understanding, and please correct me if I'm incorrect, that the utilities department role in this is limited oversight in regards to those who have franchises and that interaction. The real interaction as far as pole installation is supposed to be done by DPW, by safety and permits. Who gave the approval for these poles to be less than 300 feet apart? Because I would assume that safety and permits would look at the location, and based upon that distance, who gave the override for them to do this?
I'm not clear on any of these permits that were overridden. If you have specific,
I
if
guess
there are,
like, if the process is 300 feet
yes,
and the installation is less than 300 feet apart, someone said it's okay to install this pole less than 300 feet apart. Where and when did that happen and why?
unfortunately, I don't have any knowledge of that happening.
And maybe I can piggyback off what Brian was saying. Looks like it wasn't baked into the process. It wasn't taken into consideration when going through the permit application. We definitely look at addresses, and every pole gets a unique address. So we'll know the location of the pole. And it seems like perhaps this process didn't have a check for the 300 feet. And so we'll go back and see that there is a check in there.
Okay, well, I appreciate in this presentation is what the process is now. What was the process when these poles were installed?
Well, first and foremost, we have an authorized franchise agreement license. And so the only people that can see these applications are the people that actually have a franchise agreement. And once they apply, then the address has to be given. So we look for, and that's why the scope of work is in the determination on whether it's a replacement or whether it's a new one. If it is a new one, it needs a site address, a location, a unique location. And so that's when we look at that part of the location. And like I said, it looks like that process didn't anticipate or include a review of whether it was 300 feet at that time.
I guess
So
it seems like I said, I appreciate the DPW scope for small cell permits. I appreciate the advice and consent, I guess more advice than consent of HDLC and VCC in that process. Obviously, poles were installed before this process existed. What was the process when those poles were installed?
So this is the process. It is possible that exceptions were granted. I just don't have visibility on them. But if you tell me if there are specific locations, I can certainly look into it to find out what might have happened in those cases. If exceptions were granted, it would have been
I guess
done by Office of Utilities.
right. And I guess that's the question. Under what authority would the Office of Utilities have the ability to waive something that's an infrastructure installation that is directly within the purview of the Department of Public Works without talking to Public Works? Like, I don't understand. I understand what the department, I mean, it's being changed now, what it was, but you're talking about infrastructure installation, which is absolutely a Department of Public Works wheelhouse.
Absolutely.
Under what authority? I mean, you could say, I don't know if you don't know, but like, under what authority can the Department of Utilities just say it's okay? Like, where is that in the code or in the rule or in the description of the office? Because I can't find it.
No, I don't know that there's, and I don't know it myself of a opportunity for that.
I'm not, I would, if there are specific locations, which it sounds like there are, I would like to know what those are. Yeah, because I mean, there could have been conversations that happened between utilities and the people who handle the permitting in Public Works that I'm not, haven't been privy to, and I can certainly find out and get you an answer.
And I would certainly hope that if there were conversations dealing with infrastructure installation, I would certainly hope that those conversations were documented and in writing. Because when you're talking about giving variances on stuff like public infrastructure installations, that has to be a transparent and reviewable process. I want to go back to, and this is a previous meeting, Brian, so please follow me. There was that huge issue with the design that was agreed upon versus the first pole installation.
Correct.
And there was that very heated debate I had with Toro Blanco where they said, well, we met with all these groups and they kind of threw VCC under the bus, said, oh, they approved of this. And when we saw what was put up, that was not what was shown over there. And I appreciate that they came back to correct that, but it's beginning to appear that it was a common thread that you had people who had permits and desires for installation that were not interacting with the parties they were supposed to interact with before doing installation. Because it is obvious to me, and I think VCC would agree, I know VC Pora agrees, that had they shown you what they planned on installing those first poles, you just said, this is not what we agreed upon.
Correct.
However, you found them when the residents did, when the poles were already installed. And I do appreciate that this new process is much, much more robust. But I think it goes back to a larger issue that we're obviously still in the middle of investigating. Why wasn't the process more robust to begin with? Why was it more authority given to DPW versus the utilities office? Because it seems like everything involved in this process is DPW and safety and permits. And for that first round, how many poles were installed before this process was perfected? Do you know offhand?
I don't know the number.
It would be very helpful
Okay.
for us to kind of track that, because I do think when we're talking to residents about their complaints with this process, it's important for them to know that there is a delineating line between when we perfected a process and what was done before that. I think that'll help kind of rebuild some trust with the residents that we hear what you're saying. You can't if we're going to invoke the tout ensemble all the time, which I cannot tell you how that term is a trigger for me, but if we're going to talk about all the time, then it can't be from a city perspective when we are doing things with large companies that we hold them to a different standard than we do private developers. Because just like I see VCC and HDLC in here throwing this very contentious battle between private developers and what they intend to do and how it could violate the integrity of the neighborhood, I think that it sends a very garbled message when you see large companies doing their own thing and you guys aren't in here objecting to it.
I agree, but if I may, going back to the process when we identified the substandard quality of certain aspects of the design, it was immediately conveyed to Toro Blanco, and they immediately were in contact with us to correct the deficiencies. And in my opinion, it wasn't that they were trying to circumvent any process. The VCC and the HDLC does not typically review shop drawings or designs of things that are going to go in the public right of way. So that wasn't baked into the process. And so, yeah, I think if the VCC had been able to review the shop drawings before they'd been manufactured, we would have been able to identify these things that we found to be substandard and been able to correct it. And they agreed with that. And they never did, indicate to me that what they were doing was trying to circumvent a review or to do something in substandard quality.
To be clear, I think the weak link in this, from what we're seeing and what I've seen in the last couple of months, is probably not the company. It's probably the Office of Utilities. Insofar as every company follows the process that government tells them to follow. This process you have now is very easy to follow. The question that I have is, before this process, what was the process? Because obviously, like you said, HDLC and VCC don't have a binding authority of what this looks like, but at least because you're included in the process, it's noted. Let's say, for example, if you believe that a specific pole is going to be planted in front of someone's window, your objection is on the record, and it's noted that in your process review, you said we have a concern. If they move forward despite that, it's still, noted somewhere. Right. My question is, like I said, how many poles were installed before this process took place? And to your credit, I do agree. I think when Toro Blanco ran into their issues, they thought they were following the rules. We just didn't have the rule book to see what rules they were following. The other thing I would also like to note, and I think I can say definitively with recent construction is less of an issue. The other issue before I think DPW got fully involved in this was you had a lot of haphazard installation of poles as far as the quality of the installation itself. Brian, I know you walked the quarter early on and saw cement with a 3-inch divot that was poorly poured with boards thrown over it. And from purely a selfish city perspective, if a pole is erroneously installed on a right of way and someone trips and breaks their leg, both the city and the person who installed that pole have a problem.
Yeah, and I can tell you that DPW, we do our inspections, when they get the small cell installation permit plus the utility cut permit, we have to go out and do an inspection. Once they're done, and they can't energize that, because they can't utilize that facility until they pass the inspection. So, and we have to ensure that the pavement restoration is done, in accordance with DPW specifications. So that is happening.
And like I said, I want to commend y'all because I think now that you're involved in the process, it's being done to an appropriate standard and properly. But I don't want to make anyone think we've forgotten about the poles that were installed before there was a very transparent public process with an accounting. I mean, I think, like I said, I don't want to send the wrong message to people that if a large company is working through the city, they are held to a different standard than a private company that is just dealing. You get my point, Brian? Like, I mean, I appreciate how, and HDLC as well, and VCC, I mean, I speak for both. I'm speaking to both, but I appreciate how voraciously you defend the historical integrity of neighborhoods. But I don't want the public to feel that we will absolutely defend when someone's redoing a building, but when we're doing infrastructure projects, we would ever ignore. I mean, I understand how limited our review can be at times because of federal jurisdiction, but the fact that it's important and you're doing it in this process, that even if an installation's done and you have concerns about it, at least the public can see you noted the concern. You said, hey, this is our concern. If it couldn't be addressed, it couldn't be addressed. And we have a limited jurisdiction in that regard. But at least by having a transparent process where your input is put in and recorded, then you're doing your job.
I can tell you overall, I looked at these numbers yesterday. There have been about 650 total, permits that have been issued. I think there are 21 that are currently pending this year, but what we'll get for you is a breakdown of how many were issued year to year. So you
That
can
would
see
be
that
very helpful.
relative to when the design guide.
And you'll have because of the permits, you'll have the locations as well, right? As far as what the address is of the poles.
Yeah, well, I mean, they have, I think as Tammy was saying, they have their own addresses, but
Right.
yes.
I mean, I think that would be helpful just to, really to do a quality control to see what was done before this process became more robust, and maybe for us to learn from it and really trying to put guidelines and guardrails in going forward, because this is 5G technology. Who knows when we have 6G, 7G, and whatever else comes along, whatever we can do to make this process robust as kind of a mold or a framework for future processes, it just makes all of our jobs a lot easier. So I don't have any other questions. Anyone else? Okay. Mr. Druso.
I guess my biggest thing is, now that it seems like this is being moved from utilities to DPW, is that the appropriate amount of care be given to where it's placed close to residents. I get a lot of complaints about that. And all I ever got from Mr. Rhodes was, I'm looking into it. And I did not get a sense of, this is a criteria that we used. This is why this location is the most efficacious. This is what we did to avoid being as close to the density of residents as possible. This is where it makes the most sense in the right of way. So I'm just saying that out loud because I know the regulations call for that. And I just want to make sure, as we're pressing reset here on a new process, that those things can be articulated. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else have any questions? All right, hearing none. Thank you for.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next up,
Council member, we have 3 public comments.
I'm sorry. That's
Online.
right, you're doing them. Okay. I'm just used to looking to Anita to the right, so.
I mean, I can move over there.
No, it's fine.
Okay.
It's fine.
The first comment is from Theodore Danielson. He says, there is a cell tower 30 feet from my home. There are other cell towers nearby as well. Why do we need this many towers? The next comment is from Timothy Brannon. He says, I am unhappy that the antenna is both so close to an elementary school and my residence. I'm concerned about the potential health risks associated with radiation emitted by these towers and want to know more about how these towers are being sited and regulated to ensure safety. The last comment is from Robert Berg. He says, "My name is Robert Berg. I'm an attorney specializing in wireless telecommunications law. Last February, my daughter Zoe, now a second-year law student at Tulane, noticed markings on an existing wooden utility pole in front of 2601 Jefferson Avenue around the corner from her residence. Suspecting that a telecom was intending to install a wireless facility there, she went down to City Hall to find out what was going on. She was given a complete runaround. Eventually, she found the One Stop app and discovered that Verizon had applied for a small cell wireless facility at the site. A site plan and a permit summary were the only documents available on One Stop. The summary overview contained a status report noting that the application had been submitted on May 18th, 2021, and that intake found the application to be complete. Traffic approved the application and the status report. Eleanor Burke, Commissioner of the HDLC, had reviewed and found the application to be complete, even though the file contained only the spec sheets and status summary. I spoke by phone with Ms. Burke on February 11th, 2022. She told me that Jonathan Rhodes had directed her to automatically approve without further analysis small cell installations on wood poles that are replacing existing wood utility poles in the public right of way. And because that's what the application called for, she approved it without doing any landmarks analysis or historical review. Mr. Rhodes' illegal directive contravenes the express provisions of the city's comprehensive code. The installation site at 2601 Jefferson is located in a residential zone, historic district HURD1, under section 30.65.12 of the Comprehensive Code of Ordinances. Wireless facilities to be located in public rights of way of local streets within residential zones are permitted only when the Director of Safety and Permits grants an exception pursuant to section 30-65.13. Moreover, the director shall not grant any such exception unless the applicant demonstrates with clear and convincing evidence all of the following. One, the proposed wireless facility qualifies as a personal services facility. Two, the applicant has provided the city with a clearly defined technical service objective and a clearly defined potential site search area. Three, the applicant has provided the city with the factual reasons why any alternative locations or designs that would strictly comply with this act suggested by the city or otherwise identified in the administrative record are not technically feasible or potentially available. And four, the applicant has provided the city with a meaningful explanation of why the proposed location and design deviates is the least compliant location and design necessary to reasonably achieve the applicant's technical service objectives. The permit file includes none of this required supporting documentation. I believe multiple hundreds of small cell facility permits have been illegally rubber stamped by city officials following Mr. Rhodes' directive. I emailed Mr. Rhodes on February 18th, 2022, advising him of the situation and also complained that the comprehensive code violates residents' due process rights because the code provides no notification to abutting or nearby residents that an application of a wireless facility is being filed, and no opportunity for such persons to comment or object to said application. Mr. Rhodes responded to me by email stating that he was going to look into the permit and the issues I had raised, and I should, quote, rest assured that no action to approve the permit will be taken until we have had the opportunity to review, end quote. However, on April 7th, 2022, contractors installed a 55-foot tall pole next to the existing pole. I emailed Mr. Rhodes, who expressed shock, but the pole remains there today. Illegal installations continue daily, even after Mr. Rhodes' departure. This must stop at once. Those are all the comments.
Okay, one quick question. Who was that person who provided the last comment?
That was Robert Berg.
Mr. Berg, I think you said more explicitly kind of what I imply in my comments, which is there is definitively a significant question as to whether Mr. Rhodes was approving cell towers directly as the head of the utilities department without going through the other requisite departments. And I think that we'll be able to clarify that to some degree when we get the list of polls that were approved at what step in the process, because if you look at Mr. Berg, what is now required, it covers everything that you said. I think there is definitively a question, and it's the smart cities investigations, the gift that keeps on giving, that there was likely instances in which safety and permits in DPW were not in the process, but that is not because they sought to not be in the process. It's because there was significant miscommunication between the companies installing the poles and the Department of Utilities. So I think this is an ongoing issue. And we will certainly have more information for you as soon as we get it. But I do think it's a concern. Mr. Green, you had
Mr. Chair, I do have a question, and I'd like to ask anyone who can answer it. What is the reason for the 300-foot separation? Does it have to do with aesthetics, or does it have to do with radiation and health concerns?
I don't know for sure, but my guess would be aesthetic concerns. I don't believe that it would be a radiation concern. I think that they were, when the law was put into effect, my assumption would be that it was to limit the number of poles in a particular area.
Council member, I was Curo Chief back then. And when the ordinance was approved in 2019, Mr. Block is correct. We wanted to avoid a porcupine landscape, and we had done research that suggested that most poles could perform well with at least 300 feet between them. So we wanted to avoid an over concentration of poles, especially if they were unnecessary in historic districts or anywhere in the city for that matter.
So there's no concern other than aesthetics for poles that are close together, as has been suggested that there are some that are next to each other, or should we address that issue as a council?
Are you referring to safety concerns?
No, well, yes.
So we relied on the American Cancer Center for our review of safety
I'm actually
concerns.
asking you to just talk to the public about it, because of course, those are concerns that people question
Based-
relative to 5G.
Based on the American Cancer Society, there are no safety concerns, but as Councilmember Morell alluded to, we are incredibly limited by the Federal Communications Commission on our ability to disapprove these pole locations. So we did what we could under the code.
Yeah, I think it's important to note, and like I said, I appreciate the new process because I think it toes the line of abutting on what our authority is as a city versus federal communications law. That being said, I think that there is always a significant and valuable concern from the public regarding transparency when there is no process and no record of how poll approvals have been done. And I think to Mr. Berg's point, the fact that the code says one thing, but some of these permits did something completely different, that is a legitimate concern, not just for purposes of 5G polls, but for utility regulation as a whole. Everything the council does and our role as utility regulators is done via ordinance and public meetings. From the city's perspective outside of the council, DPW safety and permits have a very robust process they follow that creates a paper trail of why things are done or not done. Whenever you have an instance in which there are significant interests in installing something, let's say like 5G poles, and you don't follow that process, you undermine public confidence in the process. And for Mr. Berg to not only have done that work, but reached out directly to Mr. Rhodes, who basically blew him off without presenting any evidence or information, is beyond troubling. But like I said, we'll get that list from you as far as the poles that were installed in their time and when they were installed and how far they are apart or how much they met this process. I know this process wasn't in place, but this is common sense. And if poles were stacked on top of each other or too close or really thrown up willy-nilly, and companies were relying upon an erroneous process where Mr. Rhodes could just say, put it up wherever you want, that's a problem that has to be addressed, not just retroactively, but also going forward, that should be prohibited. People should know, and it should be established in the code if it isn't already clear enough. No department can supplement or disregard DPW and safety permits for something that's in your wheelhouse. I don't want anybody at Parks and Parkway telling someone they can install something in a right of way if DPW or safety and permits is required to sign off on it. It's a precedent that was set by Mr. Rhodes. It's completely bonkers, and we should never have it happen again. And if we have to do something legislatively to prohibit it, I'm happy to do so. But there's a reason why you have to go through safety and permits of DPW to get things done, because that creates the transparency in the process, which may have been lacking previously. So thank you for your presentation. Appreciate you. Look forward for that information. Next up, we have a presentation by Entergy New Orleans regarding service disconnects. Before you get started, I apologize. Mr. Morgan, come on up. I missed your card and we're so busy yelling and stuff, we didn't listen. Mr. Morgan has a comment on the cell tower permit process. I apologize, Mr. Morgan. You know, I would always get you when you come up.
Good morning to everybody in the house. I'd like to address what your two council has mentioned, the safety finishing of the poles. That is a very important subject because the reason is this. When they set those new poles or come to check those new poles or replace them and all that, they always come with a feeling, look like from some demolition, some demolition site. And the material consists of concrete, rock, plaster. And what they do, they pack that on the top surface of the pole, the space between the earth and the pole, they pack it down, but they don't pack it enough. Now, this is where the problem come in at. When somebody cutting their grass, the lawnmower may hit a percentage of that degree and send it airborne. It might hit a car. It might hit a child. It will hit somebody. And what it do, develop into an argument. And what it sometimes escalated to, this person wants to sue that person there. And the negative is because that the work was not finished professional. That safety and that security is always depend upon the finishing of that work. That should be documented. It should be enforced because the reason is that to go it on and ignoring, it can lead to many crises. Person getting hit in the eye, a child getting hurt, a lawsuit taking place, complication of a fight. All that can be avoided if the job is did right. Thank you for your concern, Councilor Morrell.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. We appreciate you. Next up, Entergy's presentation on service disconnect.
Thank you, Chair Morrell. Good morning, council members. I'm Courtney Nicholson, Vice President of Regulatory and Public Affairs for Entergy New Orleans. I have here with me at the far end, Lucretia Wilkerson, who's Regulatory Counsel for Entergy New Orleans. And also next to me is my colleague, Sandra Miller, who's Vice President of Customer Service for Entergy New Orleans. So we're here today. I'll turn it over to Sandra to talk about the Entergy's disconnect process to add more color around not only what that process entails, but also some of the processes and measures that we have in place for customers to avoid entering into that disconnect process. So with that, I will turn it over to Sandra to walk us through the presentation.
Thank you, Courtney. Good morning, council members. So as Courtney said, we're here today to talk about some of our disconnect processes and related policies. But let me state at the outset, disconnection is a last resort. There's a lot that happens before an actual disconnect occurs. And we wanted to take the opportunity to share with you how we work with customers before and after service is interrupted. So we work with customers throughout the billing process. And we can go to the next slide. Have a little bit of technical difficulty, so we'll just wait for them to be able to advance the slide. Thank you. I wanted to make sure you all had the slide in front of you so you could walk through the process with me. So thank you for that. So we work with customers throughout the billing process. And as many of you all know, a customer's bill is due 21 days after the bill is invoiced. The disconnect process starts on day 22 and it takes approximately 12 calendar days. All past due customers receive the first disconnect notice on day 23 via mail or email. A second notice is issued via text or email on the 27th day. The disconnect order is actually created on the 29th day. So if we're looking from the 22nd to the 29th, about 8 days, but New Orleans, we don't disconnect on Fridays or the weekends. So there's additional 3 days baked in there. So it's not until the 12th day that an actual disconnect order is created. We do offer a 1-month grace period for those good paying customers over the course of a year who may have forgotten to pay their bill 1 month, such that their bill is actually automatically applied to the next month's bill and they do not enter the disconnect process. And if a customer is concerned that they may not be able to make a payment, we encourage them to contact us. Customers who contact us can receive an additional extended time to pay. If they go online, they can receive an additional 9 days. If they call us, they can receive an additional 7 days. Now, if a payment extension doesn't work, a customer can sign up for up to a 4-month payment arrangement. Now, I should note that if a customer chooses this option and they are past due, their current balance can be rolled into the current payment arrangement, which in essence allows them to skip 2 months of a bill. Since January of this year, we've been able to sign up more than 38,000 customers for deferred payment arrangements via the 1-800 number, our walk-in centers, or through online requests through my Entergy. As you can see, we do not rush to the disconnect right after sending the disconnect notice, and we communicate with customers during this disconnect process. In fact, council members, 96% of our customers never enter the disconnect process. Regrettably, some customers, the remaining 4%, do not contact us or seek third-party assistance until after they've been disconnected. Again, we consider disconnect as a last resort, and we want to empower this 4% to avoid disconnect as well, because the disconnect process can result in additional costs for both the customer and the company. Even if a customer's lights have been turned off, we ask that they reach out to us. We have a tiered escalation process in place that allows our specialists to work with customers to have their lights restored, as well as to determine any payment arrangements. And we recognize, and this is important, that we cannot have a one-size-fits-all approach to assisting our customers, as every customer's personal situation is unique. In fact, our care center supervisors are constantly sharing stories with me about the creative ways that we're assisting customers. For example, we have customers that come in that can only pay a portion of the bill, and we will work with that customer on what they can pay and put the rest in a payment arrangement. And some of our unique customer base here that may get paid week to week, may get paid, month to month, that, we work with them on special arrangements. They may have to come in multiple times to make a payment, and we will set the remaining amount on a deferred payment arrangement, resulting in multiple deferred payment arrangements, so we can help them continue toward bill health. Other stories we have, I can just tell you examples of a single parent coming in who didn't contact us ahead of time, whose lights have been disconnected and don't have the money to pay. And they will say to us, we can pay you next week. So on that promise to pay, we will restore the customer's power. And when they come in the following week, we will take what they can pay and put the remaining amount on a deferred payment arrangement if that's what they need. But it really depends on the customer's unique circumstances. So I just wanted to make sure that you all understood that we are working with customers creatively when they call us through the escalation process or when they come into one of our walk-in centers. Again, some customers require more assistance than others. And so it's important for us to understand their needs. The bottom line is to understand our customers' needs, it has to be a two-way communication. If customers work with us, we're definitely going to work with them. We all, council members, you all included, the company included, have a vested interest in making sure that we are bringing our customers to bill health. And what we've learned from the COVID moratorium is that customers' arrears are higher after a moratorium. So we work with customers to ensure that our systems can offer the best experience. So what we did was we increased the disconnect threshold from the normal $125 past due to a higher number to reduce the number of customers that would be subject to disconnect at any given time. This also gave customers a bit more time to pay. So as we resume disconnects on November 1st in New Orleans, we followed the same protocol for Entergy New Orleans customers. We raised the disconnect threshold to $650. This allowed us to work with customers who had the oldest invoice and the highest amount due to get them back toward bill health. And we'll continue to monitor those arrears and balances and adjust those thresholds as needed before we return back to our normal credit policy of $125, which we have found to be the optimal amount to help customers to maintain bill health and not fall further behind. So I just want to remind council members, as well as, customers and members of the public, that we do have tools available to work with customers, and we encourage them to call us as soon as possible if they are struggling. Some tools, as you can see here on the screen, include payment options if the extensions do not work. We also work with customers on the deferred payment arrangements. We refer them to payment assistance agencies, as well as to the energy efficiency programs. We offer options such as level billing and pick a day, which many of you are familiar with. And we encourage customers to visit My Entergy and use the tools that are available to help them manage their bills. And they can also visit us at the walk-in centers. So council members, I've shared with you quite a bit on the outreach and assistance that we provide our customers during that process. And we're working further, though, to expand communications to our customers in arrears to help them better understand the timing of the disconnect process and how to avoid it. We're also working with our call center leadership to provide additional training and empowerment to frontline agents to better assist our customers. We also think there are opportunities to better educate customers on the disconnect process, and will provide information more robustly to customers going forward. And thank you for your time.
Thank you. Council members, like I said, the Granicus is down. If you have any questions, just press your mic and start speaking. I'm not going to speak till after we hear from the public. So just whenever, if there are council members with questions right now for Entergy, feel free to go.
I'll go. Thank you all for appearing. Always good to see you. Since we're friends. So talk about the COVID moratorium. What was the average balance after the moratorium? Do you know that?
I don't have it on me today, but I can get you that. It was higher than our normal arrears following that moratorium.
And the number of people who did not pay during the moratorium, do you have that number?
For the COVID moratorium,
Yes.
or the most recent
The
moratorium?
most recent one.
You know what? I don't have that number as on me today, but I can get that for you.
Okay, so if you can get me the average balance and the number of people who didn't pay during the moratorium, I think that would be helpful to round out the conversation.
And can I, for clarity, you want the average balance for the most recent moratorium?
Correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, but also on the COVID as well, just so we can kind of compare and contrast. Do you have the number of people who were disconnected as a result of not paying after the moratorium?
Currently?
Currently.
So that is an ongoing process. So the number of customers that, and based on the last stats I saw, that may have been disconnected over the last few weeks, I want to say it was less than 1,000, but let me make sure I get confirmation on that. What I've been paying a lot of attention to is the number of customers who are actually contacting us to, make arrangements and set up payment arrangements so that they can avoid disconnect.
And how many of those, how many do you have so far?
So in the month of November, we had 7,525 customers to reach out to us to set up a DPA arrangement.
So 7,525 people contacted for a payment arrangement as a result of the most recent moratorium, or generally? Can you separate those out?
Yes, I can. So prior to the moratorium ending, as I was paying attention to the DPAs, it was consistently around maybe 600 requests per week for DPAs. On the week that we resumed disconnects, that number actually shot up to about, if I recall correctly, it was about 5,000 customers. And so it's been steady, a little bit under 1,000 each month, but that total number has gotten us to about 7,525 numbers. So there was a spike in requests for DPAs the week of the moratorium, and then it stayed at about 1,000, which was higher than normal.
And I know that when we talked about the moratorium, you and I had the conversation and alerted the public that they should continue to pay. It's just like having a student loan, and during the Biden suspension, you're just going to accrue. You guys don't charge interest, but the payments will still accrue. You'll still, the amount still accrues onto the bill, right? Did you say that 38,000 people have signed up for deferred billing arrangements
throughout the entire
year? Is that average, or are you seeing a spike in that number?
I would say, and I'd have to compare it to kind of pre-COVID times because it's a little different, you know, from 2020, 2021, where we were kind of in and out of, and then we had hurricanes that impacted us. And so I would have to go back and look at those 2019 numbers to compare to where we are now. But if memory serves me correctly, I believe that we are a little bit higher request for DPAs.
Okay. Is there any payment billing assistance available? Because once you get behind, we know this. I was a law student here and had my Entergy cut off a time or two. True story. So is there any payment assistance that's available?
So it's my understanding that LAHEAP is getting another round of funding, and so low-income customers can continue to reach out to that organization. And then the other piece and component part is the elderly and disabled that we partner through the Power to Care program, making sure that we're giving donations to that organization to be able to assist elderly and disabled customers. And there's also several entities throughout the community that will step up to be able to assist customers when they have the assistance available. I'm talking about Volunteers of America, Hope House, but there are a few, and we keep a list of those agencies, and we share that information with customers over the phone. We share that with customers when they come into walk-in centers. In fact, on a monthly basis, we do reach out to low-income customers, and we send them information about low-income assistance. And so I want to say this year we've sent about 110,000 emails to 71,000 unique households about low-income assistance. And so we're constantly trying to communicate that to customers who are in that income range.
Is there any talk amongst y'all about forgiveness, almost like student loan forgiveness? I compare this, with the student loans. Is there any talk among Entergy entities about forgiving a portion of back due balances?
I would say there's always conversations that are being had internally about how we can assist customers, even over the COVID period, as we think about what other companies are doing in the industry. And so those are some of the things that we're keeping our eye on to see how we can better assist. And, I won't say that question hasn't come up, hey, let's look into that, but it's also how can we help customers holistically? And so there's nothing that's necessarily off the table, but we have to look into any of those things, how they would impact the customers, how they would impact the company, and just really the impacts overall. Because anything that's not paid is shared across other customers. And so we want to make sure that we're not putting all customers in a bad situation.
What are other entities doing? You said you were looking at other entities, energy entities.
Yeah. So I'm aware that some other companies were looking at maybe an arrears forgiveness program, but I'm not too sure which ones have come into fruition because of the cost that would be rolled out across the entire customer base. And so that's something that I haven't looked at recently. I'll just say that.
And not absorbed by the company, but it would impact other customers theoretically.
That was the program I was familiar with. It would be something that would be socialized, which wasn't something that was optimal.
No, I mean, of course it's not optimal. We don't, as much as we care for our neighbors and we should care for our neighbors. I don't know that other Entergy customers should be bearing the burden of forgiveness. I do think that there's an opportunity for Entergy to step up and bear that cost themselves. Just being honest with y'all.
Honestly, we have to look at all of that and the impacts, and that's not something we've looked at recently.
Okay, thank you.
First of all, thank you guys in your customer service division. What I think is exemplary in terms of response and how you treat people. But policy on the other side is one thing. You guys' willingness to help, to look into matters is good, but then how do you resolve it? And I think Councilmember Harris's questions about age-old issues represent the policy side. No matter what customer service does, how do you guys choose to handle it? The 4%, 96% basically are paying loyal customers, and the 4% you say usually, and that number's been pretty consistent over the years, represent the hardship, people who don't pay, bad actors, and the like. What is the demographic of the region for the 4%? And I think that would be extremely important as we take a look at the city and those numbers, because we use Entergy for population growth. Agencies all over the state used you guys' data after Katrina in terms of what areas were coming back. So do we have that data in terms of the 4%, whether it's hardship or bad actors? Who are they? And where do they live?
Councilor, I can go back to our organization to see if I can pull that information for you to give you specifics. And because I don't want to give you something off the top of my head. It's not great. And I think that would be an interesting concept where they live. And so I can go back and see if we can't pull that information for you.
Well, I think that's the kind of policy stuff, though, that we shouldn't have to be paying catch up on. That you guys have been around long enough to have that information. And that information could have been real instrumental in how do you target a demographic? How do you target a region? How do you use budgeting and resources and mitigation programs? Because historically, you guys would have known that in this area with this group, they're either bad actors or hardships. So how soon could you guys begin to pull that? Because I think for us, especially for district council members, that's critical. It could have been used during the budget where we could have looked at our districts and said, hey, look, now this neighborhood, this community over the last several years, is the ones who have the biggest challenge paying this utility. We need that information.
So, Councilman, I will say, I don't have the specifics with me today, but you're correct. Overall, we understand that we have some challenges in this urban area. And it's part of the reason why we do have the walk-in centers to make sure that we're able to accommodate, our customers in this area. But I can get you the specifics, but you're correct. Based on the demographics, there are some things that we have done differently in this area that we don't have in other service territories.
Yeah, but let me say this, even more than challenges to go in line, because I think Councilmember Harris was onto something. As I take a look at, historical use and some institutional knowledge and going back, studies have shown that there are pockets in this community that no matter what the economic situation, no matter what was happening with crime, those pockets in this city have not been affected. They usually fare more poorly than others. So, and you guys are one of the, if the lights are on, that usually means something's happening there. Institutions, investors use you guys' data to determine where they're going to invest or disinvest. So I just think that information is critical. And from a policy side, I would have thought that the company would know who its 96% loyal customers are and who the 4% people who are challenged, and how we fix that and how we address that, not how we deal with that here in a committee meeting, especially given what we're dealing with.
Yeah. Well, we have that, and I just need to get you the specifics on it. I don't want you to think that we are not paying attention to that, because we are. I just need to get you the specifics.
Now, continuing on a, I like working with smart people, man, especially when they don't think they know everything and they're humble, like Councilmember Harris. I think she set the table for an important discussion in terms of your guys' policy. Councilmember Harris, the policy about how they forgive outstanding bills, how they deal with people, we don't know what that is. A person could be a loyal customer for 100 years and have a $30 outstanding debt because they moved from one location or bought a house to another, and you guys will put them in collection with no one evaluating whether that person has been a loyal customer for years or whether you could forgive that. That's a fact. There are people that are in collection for $30, $40, $50, $60 that haven't paid Entergy. Why?
No, Councilmember, I'm not.
It's on their credit. It's on their credit bill.
Yeah. So if someone brings that to my attention, I would definitely look at that history and determine, if what the bill looks like. I mean, because I'm not familiar with what the scenario that you provided. But if you say the scenario out there, I would encourage that person to contact us so we can have that removed from their credit report.
Yeah, but given on the policy side, right, especially the fact that, as hard as customer service works, you have a 20, 30, 40-year, 50-year loyal customer who's not even part of the 4%, but they move from one location to the next, and that minimal fee that they owed at the other location. I mean, it would seem to me that on the policy side, somebody in the internal would say, hey, hold on a second, man. You know, yeah, they've paid us $90,000 over the last several years. Why are we going to affect their credit for the 50?
So, Councilman, I would say,
And it may be a lot more that would go into that than I'm thinking, but following Councilmember Harris's line of questioning, you know, it would seem like that would be something that you guys could say, this has been a loyal customer. We're not going to put them in a credit bureau for $50.
So let me say this. I'm not familiar with the scenario that you describe of a person that owes $30. There is a threshold amount that we use before we send customers to collection. As I sit here, I don't remember that off the top of my head, but it's not as low as $30. So I'm not familiar with the scenario you're speaking of, but I would have to, you know, look into that further and to make sure I understand if that's actually occurring.
Well, I would just think that you would take a look at from the policy side and the operation side, that if we know who your customers are, you know, usually in business, we want to know who our customers are. We want to know the 96%.
Sure.
We want to know the 4%.
Sure.
Not just in terms of whether they're paying their bill or whether we're running a business, but with the importance of public utility, you know, who is the demographic? You know, they count on your company. You can't survive without public utilities today. So I would just hope that following Councilmember Harris's line, that there would be a deeper dive on the policy side in terms of not only how you allow us to turn on the lights, but how and who are able to keep the lights on based on their history with the company and their citizenship here in the city. I think we're there now.
Yeah, Councilman, we definitely have a line of sight on those individuals who enter and are part of the disconnect process, and we're communicating with them both during and after. And so, like I said, I can get you the specifics, but I don't want you to think that we don't have a line of sight on that 4%, because we do, and we are communicating with them.
Well, we have 5 district council members, and I think it would be very helpful if we could know, you know, where the lights are usually on or off, who usually gets them turned on and cut off, so we could use that data as we budget, as we plan, as we target communities, based on let there be light. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Councilman Druso.
Thank you. Good morning. I realize Entergy is not responsible for geopolitical forces, but my bill has gone up by 35%. My bill. So what do we tell people who are saying your bill's 20% higher, 30% higher, 40% higher about what Entergy is doing to mitigate that?
Yeah, so there's a lot, council member. You're right. I think everyone's bills have gone up over the last several months, and in part related to natural gas prices as well as temperatures. And so first and foremost, you have to understand the driver of what's causing that bill to go up. And so the first thing we want to do is we work to educate customers about what is driving the cost on their bill. Is it their AC unit? You know, is it, you know, some other appliance at their house? Is it their usage or their management? So that's the very most important piece, understanding the driver of your bill and how to manage it. The other piece that we are also offering is energy efficiency is so important. We've had customers who have actually availed themselves of the energy efficiency program and saw a significant difference in their bill. I think over the summer, we had several customers talk about, how those energy efficiency programs help them. So that's another thing that we're doing to work with customers about the high bills. And then for those who qualify, we're definitely referring them to assistance agencies. And another thing, council member, I think you recall, we were one of the only utilities in the country that stepped up to actually give shareholder dollars to assist customers with some of those high bills. And so it's multifaceted, of how we're working with customers. Education first, making sure we're referring them to programs that can assist them to manage their bill, and also any assistance agencies that can help them actually on that bill.
I get it, but I don't really think that's addressing sort of the issue that I'm raising. My issue is These bills haven't increased 2%, 5%, 7%. I mean, those are things that people can account for. And so we're in an environment where milk costs more, gas costs more, energy costs more, everything is in a rising scale. And so we need a symbiotic relationship with our customers. And that means they're being asked to give more. So I think Entergy has to help meet them in the middle. And my concern is, it's one thing to say for people who are skirting the rules and you're cheating the system, you just don't want to pay, that's wrong. We've said that with Entergy, we've said it with Sewage and Water Board, we've said with property taxes. I get it. But the reality on the ground is kind of like costs have gone up, income has remained flat, and so people are stuck. And I think what we're trying to figure out is what is the best way to make it so even with the 4%, we smooth those things out, because the worst thing that happens for Entergy is not to get paid, and then those costs have to be spread out elsewhere. But then for those people, then they are affected adversely because their credit scores go down, they can't go buy more things, all of those. So it's a cascading series of problems for consumers too. So I guess what I'm saying is, we've lived through a lot of unique times right now. COVID is being one of them, Ida being another. This inflation is the worst I've seen that I can remember in such a long time. We may be approaching another recession. I just think there has to be some sort of planning here, because it doesn't look like we're getting ready to go on a down curve. It looks like we're still up. And I want to make sure that there's balance between everything. Number one. And I guess number two is, we said 4%. What is it? Do you know the total number of accounts that is in terms of 4%?
In the 4%, you're gonna have me quickly try and do the math in my head up here. We have about 200,000 customers, so it would be about 4% of.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine. And then I just want to know, is that number static from where it was in 2021, or is it higher than it was in 2021? Do you know that?
Do you mean pre-COVID, the 2019?
No, I mean, I guess let's go 2019, 2020, 2021, 2022. Do you know the percentage?
I don't know that off the top of my head.
Can we get that information? Because I think, again, we're just trying to figure all this out. And look, what we're all trying to balance, and this is just coming off the budget too, right? Is how much money does public safety get? How much money does root cause program get? How much money does homeless support get? How much? So all of these things matter as we're trying to do everything. And I want to be very consistent, because I say it to sanitation, it's not just utility, not just to energy, but as all of these costs rise, they accrete. And what I'm getting really worried about in a bigger picture is we're in assessment year next year. And if our assessments go up dramatically again too, then you have assessments that have increased, you have energy bills that have increased, you have sewage and water board bills that are frequently incorrect. Your trash is being picked up less. It becomes a difficult environment to live. And I just want to make sure we're making it as hospitable for everybody as possible.
Sure, council members, we'll continue to work directly with the council members on those issues.
Thank you very much.
Does anyone else have any comment before we go to public comment? With that, I will speak after public comment, but first up, we have Jesse George.
Thank you to the chair and to the committees. Jesse George on behalf of the Alliance for Affordable Energy. I'd just like to say, to remind the council of a couple of things. First of all, on November 2nd of this year, Entergy Corporation held its Q3 shareholder call. And Entergy New Orleans boasted a return on equity for the third quarter of this year of 10.4%. And I would remind you that this council has approved them to earn between 8.85% and 9.85%. So they're doing just fine. And I would add too that this Q3 report comes on the heels of this moratorium. So these earnings were taking place while the shutoff moratorium was in place, which tells me that the financial health of Entergy New Orleans does not depend on their ability to disconnect service or even to threaten disconnection of service to vulnerable people in our community. I would also remind the council that you voted earlier this year to form an arrearage management program working group to develop a citywide arrearage management program for every customer of Entergy New Orleans. Talks around that program have completely stalled out. The Alliance submitted a proposed plan that would forgive debt as well as enroll people in Energy Smart to prevent them from getting into arrears in the first place. But again, the talks around that program have completely stalled. So I would urge you to hasten the process around the development of such a program for all customers. As winter approaches and the cost of methane or natural gas remains about 25% higher than it was this time last year, the council should once again institute the residential service disconnection moratorium that protected ratepayer lives over the summer, but which the council allowed to expire on November 1st. You know, frankly, no one should be suffering in the dark and the cold while Entergy executives are nice and cozy at home during the holidays and earning well above what they're approved to earn. I appreciate Council Member Harris's comments about the company stepping up to maybe eat some of these costs because they're doing just fine while the rest of us are suffering. I also appreciate Councilman Giarruso's comments because, you know, in its presentation, Entergy says that they incentivize payment behaviors so that customers can avoid large balances. I would submit to you that most people who aren't paying are not paying because are not paying because they just don't want to pay. They're paying because they can't afford it, because Entergy's bills are astronomical. And that isn't because of things outside of their control. They have deliberately kept us dependent on natural gas, which is now astronomical. They have deliberately, blocked development of transmission to bring cheaper renewable energy into the city. And I would also remind you that they have a pending application before you for $170 million in costs related to Hurricane Ida, which is further going to escalate bills. So this is a crisis, quite frankly, and New Orleanians shouldn't be suffering while Entergy fattens their pockets. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. George. I have Jarrett Slokes, or is it Jarrett James? I can't tell. It's two names on this thing. Jarrett James. All right, Mr. James.
Oh, funny, this is my first meeting, and it's nice to meet all of you. I know so much about the city, I would say, in my own way, more than most of y'all in here. And I'm not a politician, though, but the city is my heart and my soul, and it has saved my life as helped me.
We can't hear you so well. Could you?
This city has helped me confront, and I'm actively working through my trauma right now. And I am privileged, and I want all this on the record. This is the most beautiful place in the world for me. And it's not for everyone, but I know everyone here. Y'all are all elected officials. I'm not a politician. We all should, if we are all genuinely ethical and good people, we should want the best for everyone, and yeah, I would like to talk about how on the morning of November 30th, because I am privileged, my power got shut off by Entergy. And then they tried to verbally extort me multiple times via 4 different employees over the phone verbally. I spoke to 6 employees total that day. I have phone records and I have call logs. I even walked to WDSU. Are y'all in the house? The one in the warehouse district? Is that you, sir? Nice to see you. I spoke with a gentleman there who heard Nina, the 6th and final caller, after I was put on a 45-minute let's smoke him out hold because I caught on to the bill discrepancy I was having, and it is unusual for a Fortune 500 company to tell someone that just spent half of their savings account, which for me was $731.89, that wasn't enough money to get my power back on. They needed more. That's evil and it is disgusting. And the second person I was talking to literally told me, after telling me various increasing amounts of money, which the final sum I can't remember exactly, do not quote me directly on this. I have $278 written down in my notes. It was a sum in between $200 and $300. That person told me I could pay that amount. He had told me multiple amounts, tried to extorted me. I am smart. I told him basically, pardon me for cussing. I'm like, I don't remember exactly what I said, but like, what the fuck is going on? This is unusual. And he told me, or you can sit in darkness, and hung up on me. That is vile and that is disgusting and it is sick. I want everyone to hear that. I have all this in writing. It is in my head. I have terrible ADHD and I have a lot of trauma I need to work through. I sent y'all a letter. You read those letters. I have nothing to hide. I just posted. All my friends think I am losing it because I am not actually losing it. I just need to I have to acknowledge my privilege and I need help. And I need you guys to help. I need a medical professional to help, but this is real.
Yeah, we have, as you can see from my reverb, just our technology is not working. We can hear you.
Exactly, because we all deserve better. It's pathetic. I want you to hear this too. It is gross that Entergy would lock me out of my online account to where I cannot verify the sum of money that I literally just paid because they told me that is the amount I need to pay. And I cannot verify it because they are verbally telling me, emphasis on verbal, there's no paper trail to this. So it is now a game of he said, they said, whatever, who said, these phone calls will prove that Entergy employees, 4 of them, tried to verbally extort me over the phone. I talked to 6 employees that day. I found a bill discrepancy after my first call, or during my first call, I should say. I'm going to pull out my phone and start reading some stuff because I want all this on the record.
Mr. Jarrett, everybody's got a time limit. I've let you go over yours because you were expressing some
Sure.
stuff. James, my office has your information.
I would love to speak to whoever.
I will speak to you, but I'm also going to pose some of these direct questions to Entergy when I call them back up. We're going to get through all the public comment and then I'll get some final comment. We're going to get your information. This is not the end of it. It's just that we have to keep the meeting moving, so other stuff to do.
Sure. I'm happy to answer. I can be here all day. I'm happy to talk to all you guys because this is important.
Okay.
And it is real and I can prove it.
Thank you, Mr.
And I don't need the phone calls to prove it. That's what I realized. I can prove it multiple ways. Thank you for your time, y'all.
Thank you, Mr. James. Next up, Bob Morrell.
Bob Morrell, 6334 Canal Boulevard. So the residential shutoff moratorium, it was put in place for a reason. And that reason hasn't gone away, but the moratorium has. The pandemic and resulting economic recession is still ongoing, which begs the question why the moratorium was allowed to lapse in November in the first place. As mentioned by Mr. George, Entergy New Orleans has exceeded its 9.85% cap on returns for equity in Q3. And I'm curious if these millions of dollars in extra profit exceeds the total amount of balances in arrears. In other words, are they making profit over people? This council recently budgeted for medical debt forgiveness. Thank you very much, Councilmember Moreno. And the reason for that is because we all understand that no one should go into debt due to something necessary for them to live. Now, considering people who need electricity to live or to feed themselves and their children, I ask, why is electrical debt considered any different? The practice of residential shutoffs is economic discrimination for a necessary service to life, and it should be ended permanently. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Morrell. Next up, we have Jack Reno Sweeney, followed by Natalie Lewis.
Hello, council members. Thought I'd be a little bit more angry today, but I really like what I'm hearing from y'all today. So, but I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. So just as my colleagues back here mentioned, I'm going to go over a little bit about the previous moratorium. As Jesse mentioned, Entergy New Orleans and Entergy Corporation made record profit even during this moratorium. Something we also know that our friends at Entergy probably don't want to talk about is that in conversations with their shareholders, they're happy to say they deferred maintenance to increase shareholder dividends. Next, Entergy pretty regularly claims that Louisianans, New Orleanians enjoy some of the lowest rates in the country. Now, charitably speaking, that's quite a misleading claim. If we're being honest, de facto, it's a lie. That doesn't account for the supplemental fees, which, as Jesse reminded y'all, they're asking for more of. Again, those fees meant to pay for maintenance that they've deferred. And it doesn't account for the increased cost of gas, which is only a problem because Entergy has, slow rolled the transition to renewables. In fact, just briefly, in St. James Parish, they passed a moratorium on solar development in response to a plan to build a solar farm that would power Entergy New Orleans. Now, I went up there several times, at least 3 council meetings in St. James Parish. So did many retirees, people taken off of work, and Entergy went there one time. That moratorium on solar development passed. So, and apparently Entergy's got no plans to account for that. So I'm just going to pull up briefly, and I know it's a phone screen, so y'all can't really see it, but I think my point will get across. Entergy made $1.2 billion in profits, right? We've got $11 million in debt in New Orleans, right? That big blue bar, the one you can actually see, is their profit. I promise you there's a blue bar there. You can't see it though. That's $11 million. That amounts to basically a rounding error in their profits, all the debt that residents in New Orleans hold. So we can talk about payment plans, and Entergy loves to talk about payment plans. It should be noted if someone, it's some hardship and they're not able to meet the terms of that payment plan, they get penalized, right? So I posit we stop talking about payment plans and we start talking about making Entergy pay. Like I said, this debt could be wiped out without even significantly impacting Entergy's profits, right? So, why don't we ask Entergy to pay for once? If Entergy was still profitable during the previous moratorium, there's no good reason not to reinstate it and in fact make it permanent and make Entergy pay for once. Council Cares, you're doing Council Cares 2, that staunches some bleeding, but it does not resolve the issue. Plus, we're taking.
Can you finish up, Mr. Sweeney?
I will.
Thank you.
Plus, we're taking $3 million in public money and putting it directly in Entergy's wallet. Y'all's job, and y'all have been doing a pretty good job. Y'all's job is not to handhold Entergy through the process of dealing with mistakes and improprieties they're made. Y'all's job is frankly to represent and protect residents from Entergy continuing to screw them over. You can do that by reinstating that moratorium first. Secondly, wiping out $11 million in debt. And thirdly, ending this bad joke for all and municipalizing Entergy. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. Sweeney. Next up, Ms. Lewis. And after Ms. Lewis, we have Mr. Morgan.
Good morning, council. As an energy customer and as we all need energy, it's impossible to believe that companies that deal with energy are making $20,000 a year bonuses from Entergy. The new substation that was put in the east, I have a client who works for a company called Wardzilla, and he worked on that project, and his bonus was $20,000. And for him to have that conversation with me, he laughed in my face, as we as residents of the city can't afford to pay our bills. Now, me as a constituent of Entergy, I've had multiple instances since Katrina I've had Entergy to put the sewer line or gas line through my sewer drain. And because I've noticed it 11 years later, when we are in the middle of COVID, no one can react to my complaint because it's outdated. What's outdated? The utilities that we're getting, the substations that they're using, they're getting them fixed. They're getting them fixed with our money, and we're not getting anything. I have a property that's being dilapidated because of the backups of the sewer and the gas line being put in the sewer drain. Who's paying for that? I am. As a small rental property owner, I have multiple properties, and my tenants are going through the same thing. Are they able to use the Energy Smart program? If that's the case, I will have all of my tenants sign up. I have solar panels on all of my properties. But again, even on my property, I have a large home. The bills are going up. There's 2 people living in a large home and I'm paying $300. Solar panels, it's unbelievable. I can't get any answers. You call Entergy, you go to Entergy, pay your bill. And that's where we are as citizens. And I think the bag being held by the citizens is not fair when Entergy is showing profit. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Natalie. Last up, Mr. Morgan.
Good morning, Councilman again. I have listened to many cases that have came in many scenarios, but I'd like to express this one here. There's a woman that lived on a back street from me. She was looking for her light bill. She couldn't find it. So I was walking in front of the house one day. She said, Morgan, I can't find my light bill. So I went to look through my mail. Her number is, mine is 8312 and hers is 83 Forsyth on the back street. Her mail came to my box, so I bought it around it. But yet, you understand, they threatened to cut her bill off. But this now, it bothers me about this here. Energy is so hard on the people, delinquent of paying their bill. But when it's time for them to step up to the plate, it's sad. When emergency come to you, they cannot handle it. They always call in substitute energy company to back them up. God damn, the city they got too big for energy. But you know what it is? They don't care because they don't want nobody else in the equation because they want to dominate the whole revenue, the revenue themselves, you see? They're greedy, but they don't care about the people. The only solution that I see to this, you understand, open the door of opportunity to other energy companies to come into the city like Dallas and other energy companies. These people here been here over close most to 100 years. And they're not going to let nobody else come in and get in on their profit. But the point is this, the people is suffering. They could come up here and bring the highest taker minds in the company. But the point is, they don't mean the people no good. It's all for their profit. The people don't believe in energy no more. They lied to them. And you yourself know that they had abused the money that they had given in the future, giving their employee $35,000 raise, and also buying jewelry for the employee and giving them lavish vacation. Damn it, look at all what they did and you still won't believe in the people. Stop all this. Those people there in the shame to see, as Afro-America know what our people going through, they are part of jail party they rip off too. I had a job, you understand? $35,000 a year, but when I see when they were ripping the people off, you know what I did? I resigned and work with the people because principle and moral is for my people. Good job. Good job.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Batiste.
Good afternoon, Council. How y'all doing? Today, I'm here to talk about energy. We know energy is a fraud. There's people in the community. I go all across the city. People call energy to pay their light bills. You don't get no result. I met some man in there from energy. They had a lady with 4 kids. He ain't called me yet about the energy bill. When you call energy, you call that customer service. That do not work. Now look at here, council. Y'all letting energy go too far. They tell y'all they're gonna pay some people bills, but that's their friends' bills they pay. The poor people don't have a chance to get their bills paid. So we must do better when children go home to no lights. That's a shame. Energy is a fraud. So what I'm telling you, council, y'all got powers. Y'all got powers. I've been reading. The council got powers, and y'all need to let the law down. Y'all need to let the law down. If they're not going to do the job, bring some other energy companies in here. We must hold them accountable because energy is a fraud. People lights are cut off. But, you know, I got to shout some council people, some council member eds out like Andrew. When I call Andrew, he takes care of the energy bill. When I call JP, what is his name, Keaton James, they take care of the bill. They make sure that the people have. Some of y'all other council eds is a waste of time. Not you, Joe. Not you, Leslie. But at the end of the day, some of y'all other people is a waste of time. Oliver people, he did help, you know, but Oliver, I'm disappointed in you, brother, because you left me hanging on the criminal justice. And man, you cool, man. Man, you come from the hood. All I'm asking you, I don't know if you saw the Facebook, but you know, Noonie. You know it. We have good times, we have bad times. But what I'm asking you, Oliver, what I'm asking you, the monitor gave you the report. And it says that the police violated the law. Do the job, man. You on the criminal justice. Man, you shouldn't be hate each other because we go from a little bitty boy. When I called you about the gospel fest, you made it happen. When I called you about the kids in the community, it made it happen, Oliver. But don't change on me, brother. Give the law. And I ain't saying go with Noonie. You sit on the criminal justice. The police violated the law. And Jay Bank broke the law. And what I'm saying, Oliver, to you is, you're on the criminal justice, let's use our powers. And I ain't coming at you, Oliver, because we work together. But I'm very upset about the criminal justice. Eugene Green, you surprised me, brother. I got to give it to you. Because with Miss Jasper, you went with her. So I give people kudos. And this council, y'all are impressing me. But when y'all wrong, Noonie gonna tell y'all wrong. Because y'all using some powers that I never saw before. No council has used the powers that y'all do. And I know y'all be in the back about to pull each other hair and the next day y'all friends. I like that too. You know what I'm saying? JP Morrell, your nickname is Van Dam. You know why I call you Van Dam? Because, boy, when you ready, you bring it. Helena Moreno, guess what I call you? Jackie Chain. Jackie Chain, you know what I'm saying? And I'm keeping it real, you know? And I call Oliver Thomas, guess what I call Oliver Thomas? The Monopoly man, because he ain't trying to take the money.
Okay. Thank you for that, Mr. Batiste. I have some comments also. I think
Council member,
yes.
there are 8 online comments.
8 online comments. All right. I will give 5 minutes to that because and everybody else will be added to the record. While I speak before the online comments, come on up. Let's bring some energy representatives up. I've got a couple of quick last minute questions I need to get answered, and then we'll go those last 5 minutes of online questions. I don't intend to belabor this to be very long. They're very specific. And like I said, once I get through my question and comment, we'll go to the 5 minutes of online questions. And then since Mr. Thomas is here, we will pivot to the Sewage and Water Board ordinance so we can get that out the way. My first question is, how many households are Entergy customers in the city of New Orleans?
How many households?
Households.
Okay, so I'll have to get that for you, but I do know we have about 200,000 Entergy customers, give or take about
200,000.
The last number I saw was about 207,000.
207,000. thousand. So roughly we have 200,000 customers that are 200,000 households that are customers. And from your previous testimony, we have around 38,000 that are on deferred payment plans.
That we've offered throughout the year, maybe not currently on one, but that we've offered.
Okay, over the year, we've had 38,000 on deferred payment plans. So roughly, and Councilman Druso, correct me if my math is wrong, but 1/5 theoretically at some point this year have been on deferred payment plans.
And it could be multiple, could be not, it could be one person that has multiple deferred payment plans that's included in that.
If you could get clarification for that number,
Okay.
I'd appreciate it. But I guess my question is, that is tremendously concerning. That, to speak to the points that have been made by many of my colleagues regarding the fact that our entire nation is on the borderline of a recession. We have tremendous inflation throughout the country. We have energy bills that on average are going up by 35%. Part of my concern, and I've expressed this both publicly and privately, is the complaints my office get largely revolve around the fact that you have people that are on a payment plan, they miss a payment, and many contact my office and say, now I owe the whole balance to get my power cut on. And regardless of the options available, I think the challenge we face, this goes back to when we had the first moratorium this year, and when we went to the plan to give credits to customers that were paid for by Entergy stockholders. And I said at that time, if you may recall, that our overemphasis on technology as a mechanism for interacting with customers was problematic. We had Mr. James up here, and I don't see him here anymore. He must have left, but Mr. James made a comment where he said that he was contesting his bill and he was locked out of his account. I have a significant concern that as we push customers to go to paperless billing, because that is certainly something every company is moving to, why in the hell would Entergy lock a customer's access to his own account? Why?
So, council member, I don't specifically know the specifics around his account information. I don't know if it was something he input, whether it was too many passwords, the reason he got locked, I don't know. So I'll have to go back and investigate that part. And I'm hesitant.
Generally, outside of Mr. James, I want to know if there's any policy where a customer can be locked out of their account. Because I can't think of it in my brain for any rationale. If someone goes to paperless billing, their only record of their bills and their payments are virtual. There should be no locking someone out of their account, even if their account's past due. Other than them physically closing their account, if their only access to their bills is electronic, no customer should ever be locked out of their account.
Councilmember, I'm not aware of customers being locked out of their account in the sense I think that you're using it. I mean, there may have been something with technology, something they input that caused that. I mean, I know I myself have.
I'm very familiar with making the wrong password too many times or all that.
Right.
What I'm expressly requesting is I need confirmation there is no mechanism in which Entergy New Orleans, because that's who we regulate, can lock anyone out of their account, period. It's either a yes or no question. Go back, give me the answer. But I don't ever want to hear an instance of someone being locked out of their account when their only way to access their bills, their payment information, to contest billing discrepancies is an electronic medium that they don't have whole control over, because that is significantly problematic.
And Councilman, I will say that there are times we have to do maintenance on our systems, and sometimes we will have to take those systems down, but we typically have a banner that says that's what I'm saying. We can give you scenarios by which a customer may lose access for those kind of reasons, but I think I understand.
I don't think we'd have someone who would take time out of work to come down here and sit here because your site was down for maintenance. I think everyone understands that, but like I said, what I want is confirmation that there is no mechanism barring a service outage
Sure.
or customer error where anyone can be barred from their account. As I said, within that statement, I talked about this practice of if you miss a payment and you don't call Entergy and ask for permission or do some kind of notice, isn't it true that if you miss a payment and don't have communication with Entergy, that in order to become current, they can accelerate you to pay the entire balance due? Is that a yes? It's a yes or no question.
So I would say that when customers call and they have been disconnected, that the agents, their systems are set up where they accept the full amount due, but there's an escalation process for them to be able to get assistance.
What if
beyond that age.
okay, so you're saying by default, if someone misses a payment, by default, the first step is paying off the whole amount unless they are able to negotiate themselves back into a process.
Yes.
Is Entergy required to let them negotiate themselves out of accelerated payment?
We have.
Well, my point, let me reiterate that so that the public understand it. It's at Entergy's discretion as to whether or not they have to pay the full amount due or whether they can re-enter deferred payment options, correct?
We work with anybody that contacts us and wants to set up a deferred payment arrangement. Okay, but there's also, you have to balance that as well with, how far they are behind. Are we leading them toward bill health? And so that's why the frontline agents will refer them to a specialist that can work with them through that process. So yes, we don't basically say, hey, look, you can't have a DPA, you can have a DPA. It's everyone, we will discuss with them a situation that best fits their needs.
I am very impressed with your ability. You are an excellent witness, and that wasn't the question I asked. The question I asked was, it's at Entergy's discretion as to whether or not they have to do an accelerated full payment or be given other options. It's at the company's whole discretion. I'm understanding you're saying typically we don't do that, but the question is, if a person misses a payment on their deferred payment arrangement, Entergy has the complete discretion as to whether or not they get to have other options or they have to pay the full amount.
Let's put it this way. The full amount is due once you miss the payment. Okay. And that's a part of the policy and part of the service regs. The full amount is due once you miss the payment. But you're right. We do work with customers, and based on
you keep saying you're right. That's not any of the point I've made. The point I made, it was a very yes or no question. So yes, your position is yes, Entergy has the discretion because once you miss the payment, the full amount is due. Entergy has the discretion to offer them other alternatives or other help.
And Councilman, I'm responding because I do know that there are a number of employees who work with customers day in and day out, who are probably watching this exchange and want to make sure that I am articulating what they do. The mindset is to help, not necessarily say, hey, look, I'm not trying to assist you here. Our mindset is to help the customer so they can have the lights on and to bill help. So that's why you see me trying to make sure I'm articulating what we actually do in practice.
I appreciate your sticking up for your team. I appreciate your representing what they intend to do. But as a regulator, I'm looking at what authority we have, what authority Entergy has as a company. As a company, it is at Entergy's discretion as to whether or not they offer additional options or whether they accelerate to the full amount, because the full amount is due, correct?
That's right.
This is something that's been brought to my attention more and more often in the last coming out the moratorium, because there are people who get on a payment arrangement who have every intention to pay, and they will miss a payment, may miss 2 payments, may miss 3, because as their Entergy bill continues to accelerate in cost, as Councilman DeRusso said, the 20 or 30% per month, there are people in the city living paycheck to paycheck that it may have to decide on any given month, do I pay my Entergy bill or do I buy my insulin? Do I pay my Entergy bill or do I pay my rent? And I guess part of what I'm responding to is there seems to be a lot of either directly or indirect reference to those people who are trying to play the system versus those people who want to be good customers. And what I would argue in that this very surreal time where the economy is in complete flux, by default, in my interaction with people, everyone wants to pay their bills. But when you look at the rising cost of simply existing in New Orleans, if you have to prioritize your insulin, your rent, or your energy bill, I think energy might be third on that list. And the fact that someone may fall off a month or may fall off another month, the fact that at any given time, they could lose access to their entire access to having a powered household at discretion of a company, it's troubling. It's really troubling. I think Councilman Thomas made a very good point. I think we should always take into account there are people in this city far older than I that may have never missed a payment to Entergy in their whole life and might be struggling just this year. And the fact that if they miss a payment 2, 3, hell, they miss 6 because they're trying to figure out how to live here. Companies as a whole generally treat people like that, not as valued customers, but as cows that have stopped producing milk. And what we need and what I'm asking for, and I guess asking before demanding, I really want to break down over how many people have been accelerated to full payment. I want to break down of how many people have been sent to collections. I really want to break down, because you have the data, how many people that are facing both those instances are customers who've been customers of Entergy for over 15, 20 years. Because I would tell you that most smaller businesses, if you've got a valued customer and they're having a bad year, you work with them through the bad year, not through the bad month. And as a council, and I hate to Mr. James left, but if there was ever an instance, and I'm going to be completely candid, in which you reviewed a customer service call where someone ever told someone, if you can't pay, sit in the dark, that person better not be at your company anymore. I know you take customer service very seriously. I'm sure that you can look at Mr. James's file and see who he spoke to, but I don't care how bad your day as a customer service person. When you have that kind of control over someone's life, if the words came out of your mouth, if you can't pay, sit in the dark, you better fire them post haste. There are a lot of questions today that remain unanswered. I think it's also important to note, as Jesse said, the cost of natural gas has gone up, and we've had several service interruptions at Grand Gulf. And it is unconscionable to me that we have charged ratepayers over the years to maintain Grand Gulf. And when Grand Gulf goes online and we have to go on the market to buy gas, ratepayers are being screwed over twice. First, they paid for a nuclear power plant that's not working. And then they're being paid for the gas you had to buy on the open market at a premium because it wasn't expected to be necessary. And if a customer has fallen behind on their payment plan because the cost of gas Entergy is purchasing has skyrocketed because we're buying it off cycle because the power plant that customer has been there for 20 years is paid for, that is slapping someone in the face twice. And the fact that I have not seen any effort by Entergy to own the spiked bills for Grand Gulf really undermines my confidence in them as a company. You know which months bills have spiked because Grand Gulf went down, and there's been no effort by Entergy to mitigate the cost of the spiked months because Grand Gulf went down because it was not properly maintained as an asset, though the ratepayers of the city pay for Grand Gulf. And it's not been addressed, and it's gone beyond concerning to disturbing. And I know we have litigation over Grand Gulf. I know we have dockets over Grand Gulf, but I want to explain to ratepayers who are watching, all this stuff is interconnected. And they're all different things that when they add up, they add to your bill spike. You're behind on your bill because Grand Gulf went down, Aaron, twice this year or 3 times this year? One was planned, right?
There was a scheduled maintenance outage in the spring.
And
We
there's
had
two
two
went-
outages in the summer.
Okay. 2 unplanned outages cause spikes in your bill. What those spikes, what the cost was to ratepayer for those spikes, they deserve to know what that amount is. Because when they're looking at how they're in arrears over their bills, I think it's really inappropriate and really upsetting to think I've been paying for a power plant that doesn't work, and I've been punished by Entergy with increased costs for gas because the power plant that I've been paying for keeps going down. There's a lot on the plate. There's a lot of other things, a lot of other docketed matters, as Jesse knows and Alliance knows, that we're dealing with. And I want to remind people that despite the fact that Entergy has requested money for IDA reimbursement, that is still a process, and we are still reviewing what that reimbursement is and whether it's appropriate. That concludes my comments. Does anyone have any comments before we get to public comment on the virtually? Councilmember Moreno.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I thought you had some really good points that you just made regarding Grand Gulf. And I do think that, you know, we should get some type of understanding as to why it's never really addressed when there are outages, why that's never really really dealt with. I know that Brian and Tim are here. Sandra, you're not the person to answer that question, but maybe either one of you all could come and address the chairman's comments. I'm sorry, Keith. Sorry, Keith.
So just, I can chime in.
Or Courtney.
We did provide a presentation, I believe in August, when we explained what the incremental impact of the Grand Gulf outages were on customers' fuel adjustment clauses. I don't recall exactly what those numbers were, but they were in the less than $10. I mean, they were in the $5 range. So I wouldn't say that is, I mean, certainly that's an incremental exposure to natural gas prices, which are, as we all know, extremely high right now. But the bulk of, as we presented, the bulk of the causes for high bills were at that time in particular higher than normal temperatures and natural gas prices.
And Courtney, I remember I remember that presentation, but I think kind of the point is, okay, you know, we're all aware of what's happening with Grand Gulf. We appreciated the presentation that you all made in August, but what has the company done since then to try to you know, make sure that when things go wrong at Grand Gulf, that your customers aren't the ones having to pay for mistakes that they didn't make?
Well, I mean, the primary thing we're doing is trying to make sure the plant stays online. I mean, Grand Gulf is providing right now a really good natural hedge against gas prices for our customers. It's a nuclear facility. So we want to make sure that plant stays available. Unforeseen things happen, you know, it's sometimes out of our control. And there are replacement power costs associated to that plant going out. But I think to answer your question, I think the primary thing we want to make sure we do is to keep that plant healthy.
Yeah. And I know that obviously we've got a lot of this in litigation on the FERC level as well, but I think it would be helpful for the company to try to figure out what is the path when, you know, things do happen that are unforeseen, that are, you know, potential mistakes by the company, that it isn't your customers having to pay for those mistakes. And I would just continue to push on that you all need to really look at that and see how you can have some skin in the game here to assist your customers for things that are not their fault. I wanted to get back quickly, and this, Sandra, will relate more back to you, dealing with what Jarrett had spoke about, the customer who, you know, obviously was very upset about the way that he was treated on the phone. And I know my office has been working directly with you on his situation. Explain to me the training that goes into effect with your frontline employees, because obviously, you know, especially when you're dealing with individuals who have been disconnected, they're going to be incredibly frustrated. And, you know, how do you prevent them from kind of losing their cool and saying some things like, hey, I want you to just sit in the dark then, or you could just go sit in the dark. How do you work to prevent that? And then what do you do if an employee really did tell one of your customers that they can just go sit in the dark?
I would say that, first of all, if an employee actually said those words to a customer, that is unacceptable, right? And that's not an employee that we would want, employed with us, because obviously they have operated in contravention to their training. Our training is to offer sympathy and empathy for the customers in their situations to help them. Again, you're right, learning how to remain calm when customers call in, because you're right, sometimes it can be a volatile situation for them because they have been disconnected. I will say that, we want to make sure we're being careful that when customers call in, they're calling the correct number and they're not calling a scam number where they are actually going to a group that will actually say those kinds of things. So, that's one thing that we want to make sure that we're looking, and I don't want to say anything specific about any one particular customer's account, but that's one thing we would do. We would go and we would listen to the phone calls that have come in that have been recorded directly to the correct Entergy number to determine if that happened. If there's anything that's aloof, then we would offer additional training. Something that extreme, that would not be acceptable, and that employee would not be with us. But just so you know that we take a personal, offense when customers contact us to let us know that employees are acting this way, and we investigate and we follow up. If training is necessary, we'll provide the training. But if it's a situation where they have gone above and beyond anything that we have trained them on, then we need to part ways.
And so the situation that happened with Jared that he mentioned, is that under investigation?
Yes.
And it's still ongoing?
Yes.
Okay. Please let us know the outcome.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. We have those online comments.
Yep.
Oh,
No, that's for the next.
okay, thank you. Online comments, and then we'll move to the sixth item.
The first comment is from Sarah Bodenstein. She says, as a resident of the city, I demand that the city council reinstate the shut-off moratorium. 20,000 residential homes in New Orleans are currently at risk of losing power. Meanwhile, Entergy continues to make record profits. This is unacceptable. Utilities should be focused on providing reliable, safe power to residents, not about investor profit. In an era of economic instability, rising costs, and worsening hurricanes, it's more important than ever that no child in New Orleans is left doing homework in the dark. We demand an indefinite end to all residential shutoffs. Bob Morrell. It is an absolute shame that Entergy can continue residential disconnects. Considering the unabashed greed of Entergy to continue to make more than the allowed profit margin, paying our investors more, investing in repair upgrades to infrastructure, and giving a paltry amount of financial assistance when they're sending over $2,000 to some residents. It is a dereliction of duty for this council to continue to allow residential shutoffs. We need to reinstate the residential shutoff moratorium and further work to ban the practice altogether. People need electricity to live. Put the lives of your constituents above the corporate greed of Entergy. Make Entergy pay. Patrick Dorio. It's time to reinstate the shutoff moratorium. By Entergy's own estimates, some 20,000 residents are in danger of being cut off. This is a systemic failure that requires a system-wide solution. These are people's lives and health on the line. No heat means freezing elders. No AC means that mold grows in damp apartments. Keeping the lights on is necessary to keep people safe and healthy. Didn't y'all just pass rental standards that guarantee heating and cooling? How are they going to be maintained if people can't keep their lights on? Listen, the assistance that has been offered to residents is piecemeal at best and difficult to access at worst. Neighbors applying are facing language barriers, transportation barriers, confusion, and more. And Entergy is expensive. These bills have been getting higher and higher every year, have no ceiling, and residents who are making less and less each year are struggling. It is your duty to regulate Entergy, and until we can have adequate regulation, we need to have an end to shutoffs. Entergy is the most profitable entity in our city. They can afford it. No more shutoffs. Grace Treffinger. It is the city council's responsibility to represent the people of New Orleans, not multi-billion-dollar corporations like Entergy. Entergy shutoffs are not only inconvenient, but a public health threat. and can even result in death for people who require electricity to operate medical devices and store medicine. Guaranteed no shutoffs for New Orleanians. Isabel Manley. The Entergy electric and gas shutoff moratorium must be reinstated immediately. Working New Orleanians are especially burdened right now with inflation and financial losses suffered due to the pandemic. Wages and government benefits have not increased. So how can people living paycheck to paycheck possibly afford to pay hundreds to thousands of dollars in back pay owed to Entergy? That just isn't possible. It's unconscionable to disconnect residents' electricity, especially during the darkest and coldest time of the year, or force people to choose keeping their lights on over groceries or other necessary expenses, especially when Entergy is making such outsized profits. The only moral thing to do is reinstate the shutoff moratorium and forgive all pandemic back pay households owe. David Gross, reinstate the residential shutoff moratorium. A. Coleman, reinstate the residential shutoff moratorium. A public investigation needs to occur regarding energy rates, and residents should receive credit equal to or greater than the inflated cost of electricity and gas. Bills have doubled when my personal energy usage has been steadily decreasing. Several calls and no one has been sent to the property to inspect the meter in over a year. This is disgusting and immoral. The public should not be held ransom for your inability to manage or govern a utility you are supposed to provide. A lack of foresight, planning, or embezzling is not the fault of the citizens, and we should not pay for the negligence of your company or your ineptitudes insofar as managing citizen complaints and concerns. This is unacceptable. Megan Braden Perry. Hello and greetings to all. Since Ida, Entergy's errors have made them more of a menace than ever, especially to those experiencing financial instability. If you are even a minute late on an arrangement, you owe the full amount plus fees. The arrangements are increasingly predatory to those who've previously, as Entergy says, broken them. The website, email, text, and app all have varying payment deadlines and amounts. Old alerts were deleted from profiles, so customers. That's 5 minutes, council members.
Thank you. That concludes that item on the agenda. Next up, we have number 6, the resolution Energy Smart Implementation Program. Who will be presenting? Someone presenting? Presentation. Oh, okay. For those who are so inclined, interested in here, Jesse, I believe you're speaking on this item, right? Why don't you come on up? I'll talk while he's coming up. Essentially, this is the Energy Smart program, though my office has been diligently working with organizations like the Alliance for Affordable Energy to upgrade and change this program. By the nature in which the program is constructed and operates, it will require longer than we thought to implement significant changes. And there are a plethora of local companies that are contractors and subcontractors that are operating under the existing agreement. This simply buys us a 18-month, 2-year period in which we continue to work on revisions to the program, and it further authorized the program for a 2-year period versus the much longer renewal that they were seeking. Mr. George, your comments?
Thank you, Chair. Jesse George, once again, on behalf of the Alliance for Affordable Energy. The Alliance is pleased to see energy efficiency programming remain available for New Orleans ratepayers. But we agree with the council's sentiment expressed in the initiating resolution of docket 2204 that the Energy Smart program has much room for improvement. The talk we've had this morning around arrearages and bills, all of this ties in directly. And as I said before, the Alliance has already presented a proposal to the Arrearage Management Working Group that would pair debt forgiveness with energy efficiency programming. At a minimum, the council should establish a broad-based energy efficiency working group, as we suggested in our comments under docket 2204, that meets regularly and provides recommendations to the council on ways to improve the Energy Smart program. The council should also consider an income qualified benefits target of 15% for the program, meaning that at least 15% of energy savings should accrue to income qualified households. If you take a look at the data currently, very little of the benefit of Energy Smart goes to low income households. And we know that these are the households that need these improvements the most. So a standard of 15% would guarantee energy savings going to income qualified households. those are all my comments for this morning. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does any council member have comment? No, we're on Energy Smart. Yep.
I have some questions. I think probably Aaron, you're probably best to answer them for me. So, obviously we're moving forward with the funding for this, but some of the recommendations that are on here, it looks like those would be implemented during the IRP process. Is that correct?
So Energy Smart is part of the IRP process.
Right.
So yeah, the short answer to your question is yes.
Well, I appreciate that, but there are some things here that I would like to move forward with at a much faster pace, including some of the things that Jesse had mentioned, that's mentioned as well in the resolution. And that includes implementing an auto enrollment plan for customers who either fall in arrears, participate in the low-income housing energy assistance program, or have been disconnected for inability to pay in the prior 12 months. Is there a plan or a possibility that we could move forward on this particular item instead of having to wait to go through the whole IRP process?
So council member, there's a separate docket that would deal with these opt-out versus opt-in provisions, and that is scheduled to conclude spring of next year currently. So we're going to hopefully take up all of that at that time.
Okay, so that would be the appropriate way to get this particular piece done for the spring.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you so much.
I will move that we report the resolution, Smart Implementation Plan UD 2002. Councilmember Moreno seconds. Is there any opposed? Hearing none, it is approved. Number 7, RCPS will be deferred to the Climate Committee. And next up, we will take the motion number 8, which is motions regarding utility regulatory contracts. For those of you who are following, this deals with the contracts for our contracted legal advisors, technical advisors, and administrative hearing officers. As many of you are aware, we put out several RFPs over the course of this year to try to encourage a variety of individuals to respond. We did not quite get the responses that we'd like, but we are going to move forward with those people that did respond, and that is what we're doing today. Mr. George, you want to speak on this item?
Yes, just briefly. Thank you once again, Jesse George, on behalf of the Alliance for Affordable Energy. I actually just wanted to commend the council for the fact that you did issue these RFQs multiple times. I know that you did really try to solicit bids for these contracts. We were disappointed, as I know that you were, in the results of those efforts. But we're encouraged by the expansion of the Council Utilities Regulatory Office this year. We hope to see that expansion continue so that more of this policy work can be brought in-house to save money for ratepayers and taxpayers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. George.
Chair.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, first of all, thank you, as Jesse said, for going out to bid, trying to find more competitive ways at a better cost to represent us with your regulatory matters. But one of the things folk have been talking about, they talked about it on the show that I host, as well as in the community, is if you look at the history of that contract from Carter and Case to Wilkerson and others, the percentage of DBE or African-American participation had actually gone down. So how are we looking at, if nothing else, until maybe one day, some people want it in-house, but if it's in the house of local businesses who have developed some expertise, especially who are African-American, given the economic situation in that community, it would be very helpful if we could not only bolster that, but find a way to maybe train and develop more expertise within that community, because the per capita percentages based on information that we've gotten has actually gone down as it relates to African-American attorneys' participation. So how are we positioning that, and what responsibilities do the firms that are participating have to help develop that local talent?
Council member, I'm glad you asked that question. Our legal and technical advisors have started conversations and will start an internship program with local HBCUs. I believe Denton's and Southern will have a partnership for a year long internship program to, as you said, build local expertise in this area so that we can have increased participation from underrepresented groups.
Well, Ms. Spears, you've gone out of your way, and for those of us who follow what you've done, over the last several terms, you've tried hard to get African-American firms to participate and to respond. But I think the way now is not to get them to respond to bids, is to develop that internal and the local talent, because it's good to do good work, but economically, that community has missed out, especially since it started at a higher level than it is now. I don't think we want to lose ground there with that level of expertise and participation, especially in a growing market with utility issues and regulatory issues. So thank you for what you've done. Thank you, Chair, for at least working with the CURO to develop a method so that the next time we go out, we won't have to look for some talent. We would have developed it within that program. Thank you.
Thank you. And to Jesse's point, I mean, ultimately the goal, and Aaron is under this pressure constantly, is to simply grow CURO to the point where we minimize having contracts at all. And if you want to talk about who will be the future Dentons, the expertise people learn at a CURO office is ultimately what leads them to hang a shingle to be a new competing firm, because the reality is that nationally what we saw in this repeated RFP process is you're dealing with like NFL teams. Basically, you have these massive firms that do this type of work and they agree not to compete with each other. So what happens is that when you put these RFPs out, you don't have a lot of interest because the larger firms that may have a different DB mix or might have a different angle or expertise, they simply don't compete because everyone kind of has their regional market. The only way you're ever going to disrupt this, to your point, is to train people to be able to do that work. And honestly, I think over time, as we grow CURO in the long term, what we'll see for our New Orleans City Council with a robust, massive CURO office is that it will save us a tremendous amount of money because in-house is cheaper than doing it via contract. But also those individuals who learn that expertise at CURO, who learn about the regulatory efforts from municipal level, municipal perspective, future people from that office can then go out to hang a shingle to compete for the work locally because they'll have been taught locally and be able to compete locally. So that's certainly the effort, Councilmember Moreno.
So, Aaron, I'm going to have you brag on yourself now because we started this process of building up the CURO office, Jesse, as you know, with the assistance of the Alliance as well, about 3 or 4 years ago. And Aaron, talk about, please, the money that you've been able to save based on the fact that you have grown your office and we have reduced the amount of money going out to contracts.
Yeah, I will start with Councilmember Morel. I'm trying to keep my people, so I don't want them to hang shingles just yet. They're great, but I would like to keep them. But yeah, Councilmember Moreno, you've been with me every step of the way on this. We have saved, I think my last estimate was, I conservatively estimate over $1 million annually in ratepayer costs.
Annually.
And that's due in no small part to the amount of expertise that we've brought in-house and the administrative support that we have in-house. Councilmember Morel Moreno, you know, we're women run upstairs, but we have some great guys on our team as well who really make sure that a lot of the work and as much of the work as possible is done in-house, including drafting and research, and not just on Entergy matters, but also on sewage and water board matters and telecom matters.
But and one more thing, just to mention, because I think it's important for history perspective, is that when Erin came in, she was the only person in the office. She was the only person in the office. Okay. Everything else was consultant reliant. I mean, what I remember, I chaired utilities the last term, and I was like, wait, this is it. That's all consultants. They did every little piece of the work. And Erin has been able to build up that office over the past several years into what it is now. And so I'm extremely proud of the work that she's done, really the work that we've done together. And now I'm continuing to being followed through by Chairman Morel.
Thank you. At this point, I will move forward on the motion to appoint our legal technical advisors and as well as administrating hearing officers. Can I get a second?
So council member, these are three separate motions.
Okay, so we'll go through I don't have numbers here, so why don't I go by group? Okay, so first to a motion to hire our legal advisors. Can I get a second on that?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Green. Any opposed? Hearing none, they are appointed. Next, our technical advisors, I will move. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Moreno. Any opposed? Hearing none, that's forward to the full council. And last, our administrative hearing officers. Second by Councilmember Jeruso. Any opposed? They will be forward to the full council. Next, I will turn over the meeting to Councilmember Thomas, as we will now be in the Public Works wheelhouse to consider ordinance calendar number 33937.
Council member, just to clarify, these resolutions and motions will go on the consent agenda for the December 15th.
I'm sorry. Could we please, I will move that we add all items to the Utilities Committee that were passed without objection to the consent agenda. Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Green. Any opposed? Hearing none, they are all on consent. Next up, I defer to my other chairman, Mr. Thomas, for the Public Works Committee.
Ordinance calendar number 33937, the Swebno billing ordinance. The committee will consider the ordinance establishing a sewage and water board billing policies and appeal procedures and an amendment to the ordinance. The amendment to ordinance calendar number 33937 is by Councilmember Morel and Councilmember Jeruso. Guys?
Thank you. This ordinance is actually my ordinance.
Yes.
And I'll just give a brief overview. What this ordinance seeks to do is to create a process through which we can have due process and legitimate appeals to sewage and water board billing errors. As many of you know, I know my district council members in particular know ad nauseum, I think I'm being kind when I say there's a perception of a plethora of significant billing errors, often in the thousands of dollars on sewage and water board bills. This is problematic on a multitude of levels. First, it undermines public faith in the sewage and water board, which is a very important entity as far as making sure that we have safe and reliable access to drinking water as well as drainage during flooding events. The other thing it does is it undermines faith in government when you can have an agency that's in charge of such a life-giving and necessary service such as water delivery that can cut off your water or, until Council President passed our ordinance, send you to collections over erroneous bills. And third, we had to address an issue which has been the sewage and water board position for decades, that the best they could do was cut your bill in half. So if you had an erroneous bill that was thousands of dollars off, they maintain the position that the best we can do is cut our erroneous thousands of dollars bills to only a couple of $1,000s. And that's the best we could do. What this does is it creates the council as an appellate body, and it establishes deadlines, hard deadlines for investigation and appeals processes. First up, I'll take up my amendment. It seems very extensive, but it's very simple in process. It clarifies some language and some key additions from Councilmember Jeruso, as well as some requests from the Sewage and Water Board of New Orleans to ensure compliance with the Administrative Procedures Act and to allow sufficient but defined time for Sewage and Water Board to complete investigations. None of these amendments threatens or undermines the overall goal, which is making sure that individuals who are contesting erroneous massive bills have an actual spelled out due process, but it just tightens the language on the front end so that everyone is aware of what the rules are going into it. Councilman Jeruso, do you want any comments on this amendment, or are you good?
Councilmember Jeruso.
Thank you.
Ms. Thomas.
I don't have any comments on the amendment.
Okay, that being said, I would offer up the amendment. Can I get a second?
Well, I think it's for recommend.
Oh, sorry, I forget the committee process.
And
we can't do the amendment until the full council meeting, so.
that's okay. We have two speakers, Mr. Morgan and then Ms. Lewis. Whoever gets there first. Ladies first, Mr. Morgan.
Good morning again.
Good morning, Ms. Lewis.
Again, as a property owner of multiple properties, I've had the issue of dealing with Sewage and Water Board. Sewage and Water Board, under the current conditions, every one of my streets in front of every one of my properties has been torn up for a year and 3 months at this point. I've contacted my assistant to my councilman, and he's had some issues resolved. I've had a backhoe sitting in front of my building for 3 weeks on end. I have sinkholes sitting around my property. Again, I've been threatened by Sewage and Water Board workers because I refuse to come down and argue with them about the amount of my water bills. Based on the usage or the estimated usage that you put on bills, I have a bill on a property that was not rented through COVID for $1,200. If nobody's there, how is there $1,200 of water usage? Now, prior to some years, you used to have a formula that you can say, okay, based on these many people in the household, this is how much the water should be based on this formula. I've gone to Sewage and Water Board and asked for the formula on how to calculate my water usage. There is no formula that they tell me. Everything with the math has a formula. This plus this times this equals this. There's no formula. So I have no idea on how they're judging my water usage. I've stayed on top of them. I've had them come out multiple times where there's not even meters hooked up. I've taken pictures of mud and sludge in my reservoirs. So are the readings correct? Or are you just estimating everybody's bill? And again, based on an estimate, you've created sanitation use. You've created all of these additional taxes that I must pay on water that I have not used.
Thank you, Ms. Lewis. Everybody, you can wrap your comments up.
I'm sorry.
No, your 2 minutes were up, but you can
Okay,
close them out.
but again, if I can get a formula, I can calculate my usage and know that my bill is correct without going to Sewage and Water Board and being threatened. Thank you.
No, thank you. Mr. Morgan, followed by Mr. Baptiste.
What was that?
Mr. Morgan, I listened to what the lady had just addressed. 100% of it is reality. My neighbor asked me to go to Sewage and Water Board with her to pay her bill. And when I went in there, she had questions to ask her because her bill was so high. She said, Larry, she said, look, it looked like they are calculating each bill. She said that it's impossible for my bill to be twice what it is today. So therefore, I went there, and the woman who serviced her, the Sewage and Water Board representative, told her that her bill is calculated next month for next month. I said, well, how can you calculate a bill for next month and the person haven't used the water? And so I said, well, that's just like a person is living and God could call us right now and they're going to pay a bill that they're dead and not using, you're collecting from the dead. And so I told them, I said that that's confusion. And so she said that that's the way the system is now. Next month's bill is already calculated. I want to know if this is permissible, if this is allowed, if this is reality, if this is it's okay by the council for them to calculate next month's bill when the month haven't even played out of this month.
Thank you.
Is it reality? I'm seeing you shaking your head. I'm wondering if it's reality or not.
No, some people have estimated bills.
But so what you're telling me that they can estimate next month's bill for something that the person haven't used yet, and we still in this month.
I think one of the things we're doing right now is try to add to a solution to make sure they don't misestimate or continue with their billing.
But Oliver Tom, but still, you see, you're forgetting the main principle of that scenario is that a person can pass, all right, a person could pass away at the end of this month, and that next month, that person is dead, and that person's held reliable for their bill, something that they didn't use. Come on, Oliver, that's
No, they shouldn't be able to do that.
to the people.
We agree with you, Mr. Morgan. They shouldn't be able to do that. And I think,
Okay.
yeah, and that's one of the reasons why we're doing what we're doing today.
Okay, thank you very much.
No, thank
And
you.
y'all doing a nice job.
Thank
But, and you see, I came in here in the old administration about those meters when they first addressed it, putting those meters on on a resident house, energy. And I stated to the council, I stated whenever a company come up with a solution, it is strictly only in their behalf to generate profit. California wouldn't have those meters on their resident because the reason is California claimed that those meters generated cancer. And those meters that they label as a smart meter, yeah, it is a smart meter because it was programmed a system for energy to steal from the people. And y'all know it too.
Thank you, Mr. Morgan. Mr. Baptiste.
Good afternoon, Council. JP Morrell, what's the lady name that passed the bill? Hefton?
Hilferty.
I wanna congratulate her from passing that bill. And I want to congratulate the council because I say this, that y'all a council that I never saw before. Even if I'm disagreeing with y'all, what I like about y'all showing that y'all care because y'all dealing with Sewage and Water Board and y'all dealing with the billing process. And I know y'all still in a phase, but I do got to give y'all praises for that because people getting high bills. But this man that run the Sewage and Water Board, we need to look into his salary. How could you give a man $75,000 and the Sewage and Water Board is a hot mess? It's a hot mess. They got pipes, water running all throughout the city, you know. And I just want to tell y'all and commend y'all for that. You know, I'm down here always getting the law, getting the noonie sauce, but I got to give y'all kudos today for passing this bill. Eugene, I'm still working on your name. Leslie, one man say you beautiful, so I think that's what your name gonna be. Georgia Russo, they call you the sticker for the rules with the budget. They say you do the budget. So Eugene, I ain't want you to get offended. I'm trying to pick a good name for you, you know.
Right.
And Freddie King, I'm working on his name, but I'm gonna call him Burger King. You know what I'm saying? Because he always smiling and he always happy. But I want to commend y'all, and I just want the council to know I'm not against y'all, but I be fired up when I see things not happening in my community. But today, all y'all get the hero awards for making sure and holding the rotten sewage and water board accountable. Thank y'all.
No, thank you, Mr. Baptiste. Of course, we appreciate the role that you play. It's not to agree, but to demand accountability. And it's a blessing when we have people who do that. This legislation today, I think, answers and begins to address an historical age-old problem. The most consistent thing about the billing process with the Sewage and Water Board, especially since they put in the new billing system, is that you can count on the bills being wrong. You can count on you can count on people who have paid on average consistent bills for decades since they have invested in the new billing system. You can count on a bill in many cases up to 5 or 6 times more than you've paid every month for the last decade. So this legislation, I think the amendments address the technical issues. The combined legislation with Councilman Jerusalem Morrell in his effort, not only to deal with it at the council level, but to deal with it at the state level and put some sanity into their billing process. We believe Mr. Morgan will add another layer so that people are not taken advantage of, and so that this new billing process continues to give people bills and estimate amounts that are nowhere near what they've historically paid. So, Councilmember Morrell, when you're ready to move, adopt. And Councilmember, the Councilmember Marino.
Thank you. Okay, Councilmember Morrell, just a quick question here. So just running through the legislation, it looks like when there is a bill that's disputed, the Sewage and Water Board is going start with, my page numbers are hard to see, but go to the investigation piece. We start there.
Disputed bills.
Yeah, it's on the investigation piece. Here, I'll walk. Okay. So it looks like once we get into the disputed bills and investigation bills, that the Sewage and Water Board has 90 days to complete the investigation. Then the customer has 45 days to appeal it. Then the Sewage and Water Board has 30 days to set a hearing. And then the hearing must be completed within 30 days. And then after that, there is 45 days to appeal that and bring it to the city council. And then the city council, this is the last page, has 90 days to come up with the final decision. I bring up all of these days to ask. This can be a very long process that could last months. What happens with the amount that should or shouldn't be paid by the customer? Is it a situation where the customer would then only pay maybe their last undisputed bill moving forward? Because I would think it would be, I don't know, or maybe they pay zero. I mean, this could last potentially, 6 months through this particular appeal process. I don't want the customer to have to pay more than they have to. And I'm just kind of wondering what that would be.
Council member, sorry, I'm.
Yeah.
Council member, the intent here, and if it's unclear, let's clarify the language, but the intent here is for the customer not to be
Correct.
liable for the disputed amount.
And
So
so,
anything,
and that you just hit the nail on the head. See, that's the point. That is the intent, but that is not explicitly listed in this legislation. And I think that could be, Aaron, another helpful amendment so that it's made clear that, whether it's the last disputed amount that continues to be paid forward through this appeal process, maybe that's the solution, but I think that should be made clear.
we can clarify that while a bill is in dispute, only the undisputed amount is due.
Fantastic. Love it. See?
I do what I can.
Perfect. Thank you.
Mr. Chair.
Councilmember Jerusalem.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, in light of the comment made by Mr. Morgan, one of the amendments that I have is if Sewage and Water Board wants to send an estimated bill instead of the actual bill, the billed amount shall equal the average of the last 3 uncontested actual bills, and therefore can't just make up numbers. So in other words, if you have a bill that you pay that was an actual read that was $75, $75, and $75, they can't send you an estimated bill for $150 because the last 3 actual reads were all $75 or $5,000. That's exactly right. It's exactly what we're trying to avoid. Thank you.
Councilmember Morrell.
I have nothing further to add, and I'm not on this committee, so I can't make a motion to.
Council member, it's a joint committee, so you can make a motion.
Oh, I can? All right, well, I would move to report my bill favorably.
Councilmember Morrell, second by Councilmember Thomas.
Council members, there was an online comment.
One online comment.
Also, for the public's edification, as Councilmember Jeruso pointed out and Councilmember Morrell, the amendment will appear on the regular agenda with the ordinance. So Councilmember Moreno, I'll add in your expressed amendment. I think
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Properly moved in second, all in favor?
Aye.
Ayes have it, so ordered.
Before we move on, I'd like to comment that
It's too late.
members of my fraternity are going to be very happy with our vote today. We haven't been in our location in New Orleans East for the last 2.5 years, and our water bill is $2,000. So I'll just leave it like that. This is an important piece of legislation.
Councilmember Thomas, there are no other items on the agenda. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Councilmember Morrell moves to adjournment, second by Councilmember Moreno. All in favor? Committee is adjourned. Thank you, guys.